Chapter 303. Shikai didn't answer Silen's question. He was only saying this to show his sincerity and because Silen was the new leader of Black Viper. All the previous leaders of Black Viper knew this, so Shikai didn't feel pressured to say it out loud. But he wouldn't let it get any deeper than that. This was the Shi family's secret. Seeing that Shikai wasn't going to answer, Silen changed the subject. Then do you know where your ancestors came from? Where is their home? Shikai continued to remain silent as if he didn't want to talk about it. But Silen guessed that Shikai probably didn't know the answer himself. If he did, he would have come up with another solution a long time ago instead of focusing on creating the original robots. Fine. Tell me, what do you want from me? Silen asked. Shikai finally spoke. Ever since our ancestors created the 5 origin robots, no more origin robots have appeared in the Shi family. No matter how hard our descendants have tried, even destroying 2 origin robots, they still haven't achieved the desired result. No matter how similar they are, they're not the origin robots that we're looking for. According to the records left behind by their predecessors, the brains of the 2 original robots used for research had a kind of complex in them, which was why their brain circuits were different from other robots. They were more like humans. No, it should be said that other than the mechanical shell, they were just like humans. They had their own independent and divergent thoughts, and they had developed their own unique personalities. We also know that the complex in the brain is very important, but we don't know its molecular formula. Sacrificing the 2 robots didn't give us any concrete information about the complex, so the records left behind are very limited. Silen hadn't noticed anything special about Sigma's brain structure. It seemed that the key to creating the original robots was to figure out the unknown complex. Is there no other way? Something like a substitute? We've searched for a lot of materials to replace that complex compound. Almost all the ancestors of the Shi family have been searching for the most suitable compound material, but no matter how similar it looks, it's not the original that we have in mind. I've seen the real original robot, and these are just defective products with a fancy outer shell. After thinking about it, in order to better let Silen understand the difference, Shikai gave an example. Although these robots seem to have expressions and emotions, they are not. It was like when you first taught it to draw a straight line, it learned it, but when you continued to teach it to draw other patterns, it drew it, but it was not what you imagined it to be. It can't learn other lines either. Even if it can draw a beautiful picture with a straight line, it can only draw a straight line and not a curve. That's all. Shikai moved his finger and a light screen appeared in front of him. Shikai raised a finger and drew a straight line on the light screen. Then, he drew a circle beside it. This is the way we humans learn. What about the robots that we developed? Shikaiyu raised his finger and drew a circular pattern on the side. Why wasn't it a circle? This was because this circle was formed by a combination of lines. It was not as smooth as the previous circle. As our family's research on the original project deepened, until now, the so-called upgrade of the original project robots looks like this. Shikai's hand moved, and the circle on the screen that was made up of lines with obvious edges and corners slowly became smooth. The reason it became smooth wasn't because the lines had become curved, but because the number of lines that formed the circle had increased, and the edges and corners had become much lighter. However, there was one thing that could not be denied. It was not formed by curved lines. It was just that the combination of straight lines was more concentrated. It was similar to the rigidity of the human mind. This was a taboo in academia. A student with a rigid mind would be seen as a failure of education. That was why there were so many strange questions during the interview in AF1. Apart from the student's character and personality, they also looked at their way of thinking. People with different ways of thinking could sometimes see different patterns in the same picture. AF1 and AF2 would not want a student with a rigid mind. Research was about innovation and flexibility. The wonder of the mind was its divergent nature. A person with a fixed mind could only be described as a good soldier or an obedient student, not a ruler or a thinker. This was why the Shi family's robot researchers were dissatisfied. That's why every time we create a new batch of robots, it's like teaching a newborn with a blank mind. If you teach it to draw a straight line first, it will always draw a straight line. If you teach it to draw a circle, it will always draw a circle. But when you teach it something new later on, it will use the lines it learned from the first impression to draw a pattern. Robots that could learn a variety of basic lines were more like a pure mechanical body, a humanoid computer. Those robots that could express emotions could only use a single line to outline their emotions. It's like a complex that combines the advantages of both. It allows the robot to learn a new drawing method and express independent thoughts and emotions at the same time. Celine nodded, feeling the same way. However, suddenly, Celine remembered Cheto, the robot he created with his own hands. The robot's technology had absorbed the advantages of liquid core nuclear brain technology, but there were some modifications. Also, the substance used at the very end was the reason Cheto was able to succeed. Cheto was more like a combination of the two. It was just that it hadn't been long since he was created, so it hadn't learned much about human emotions and expressions yet. I wonder how they're doing right now. Shikai didn't disturb Celine when he saw that he was staring at the screen in a daze. He was thirsty after talking so much, so he beckoned the robot beside him to bring him a cup of tea to moisten his throat. Shikai waited for Celine's reaction while sipping his tea. If Black Viper and the others were right, and Celine's participation in the Origin project was going to take another step forward, then even a small step would be a rare development. After all, the Shi family's descendants had been carrying on their ancestors' experiments for so many years without much improvement. The robots that looked perfect to outsiders were nothing more than defective products to Shikai, and the progress they made was minimal. Hui Mao tilted its head and listened to Shikai's explanation with a blank look on its face. As a cyborg, it might not be able to understand the single and complex concepts Shikai was talking about, but it did understand one thing: these people didn't have the technology of their ancestors at all. If they didn't have the technology of their ancestors, they might not even know how to go there. If they didn't know how to return to the League of Stars, it meant that they would have to stay in this stupid empire forever. Meow, meow. Hui Mao glared at Shikai and asked in an unpleasant tone, "Doesn't that mean there are two other robots like Sigma?" Pft, cough, 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 cough. Shikai choked on his tea and coughed so hard that he almost coughed his lungs out. Some of the tea even flowed out of his nose, but Shikai didn't even bother to wipe it away. He stared at Hui Mao and asked, "Www, who did you just say?" I just asked if there were two more robots like that." Celine wanted to laugh when he heard Hui Mao's answer. He moved his gaze away from the holographic screen and flicked Hui Mao's ear. Shikai wiped the water off his face with his sleeve and took a deep breath. He was serious, but he couldn't suppress his excitement. Even his voice was trembling. "You guys know about Sigma?" Hui Mao didn't answer. It knew it had let the cat out of the bag. It looked at Celine and saw that Celine wasn't angry, so it wagged its tail and closed its eyes, pretending to sleep. Shikai was now certain that both Celine and Hui Mao knew about Sigma, one of the 5 original robots. Celine definitely didn't get this information from Black Viper. No one other than the heirs of the Shi family knew about Sigma. Even the other members of the Shi family wouldn't know about it. That kind of information was a secret. The 5 original robots had always been the Shi family's secret. Many people were pessimistic about the fact that every successor of the Shi family had to create an original robot. After all, in their minds, a robot was just a robot. It was impossible for them to develop their own independent thinking and personality like humans. They obeyed the program and the final order, so how could they be independent? That was why people only told the Shi family that they were completing the original project. They didn't acknowledge the existence of the original robots. "Show me an original robot as proof." Shikai felt bitter. Not even a single one could be produced several hundred years ago. There was no information about the original robots in Black Viper's network, and if Celine had hacked into his private network, Shikai wouldn't have been oblivious. No one else would know about it. In fact, other than a few special robots, no one else would know about it. Where is Sigma? For the first time ever, Shikai's hands were shaking. He didn't even tremble like this when he was completing a batch of experimental robots. Sillin shook his head. We can't find it. Just like you said, I also want to know the technology that your ancestors had. While speaking, Sillin stood up. Think about it carefully. There are some things that are better for both of us to be honest with each other. A secret will forever remain a secret even if it continues to be kept, and it will never see the light of day again. You can't ask for a secret to be kept and hope that someone else can answer it for you. I still have a mission, and I hope we can have a more sincere conversation after I'm done. Sillin didn't expect Shikai to spill the Shi family's secrets just like that. Shikai needed time to think about the so-called sincerity, and since Sillin had waited for so long, Sillin didn't mind waiting a bit longer. Only after Shikai had thought it through and explained everything to Sillin would he be able to make a better decision. Otherwise, both sides would be wasting time. You're leaving just like that? You're not going to ask any more questions? Huimao wasn't willing to give up. He thought he could get more useful information from Shikai, but he didn't expect to learn so little. Give him some time. He'll tell us more when the time comes. Huimao clenched his hands into fists. I wonder how Sigma will react if it hears its brothers were crippled. Something big must have happened back then. Sigma told me that his master brought a lot of people with him, but that doesn't seem to be the case from what I've heard so far. Whis nodded. Something big must have happened back then. Sillin and Huimao returned to the spaceplane and left the bastion. Shikai watched the spaceplane disappear into the distance. He stood in front of the giant monitor for a long time without saying a word. Then, he took out a necklace and pressed a button on it. The necklace projected an image of the 5 original robots. These 5 origin robots were the Shi family's most precious treasures. The necklace was the most valuable thing the Shi family's master had left behind. It recorded the lives of the 5 origin robots after they were born. Shikai looked at one of the robots and reached out to touch it. It was waving its arms around in circles. It was just a recording, after all. Shikai's finger penetrated the image and followed the movements of the robot that was being chased by 2 other robots. Sigma, other than giving Shikai some time to consider his offer, Celine had already received quite a number of messages on his communicator. It was just that Celine had been listening to Shikai all this time, so he didn't bother with them. They were all messages from Zhen Xingming and the others, especially Belle. There were a few missed notifications and messages from an unknown frequency. They were probably from the Firehawk Royals who wanted to express their gratitude to Sillin. If Sillin hadn't concocted the antidote to the zebra virus in time, the Firehawk consort would have been in grave danger. Sillin contacted Belle, and it turned out to be just as Sillin predicted. Belle promised to thank Sillin properly when he returned to the capital and congratulate Sillin for being accepted into the RAS as a student. It was a feat that many people were jealous of. Sillin was now a celebrity in the affiliated schools. Everyone knew that AF1 had an honorary scholar before he even graduated. Sillin, you might not know this, but some of the people around me who only know how to eat and shit are so jealous of you that their eyes turned red when they heard about your glorious feats. One of them had too much to drink, and when he saw your picture at the top of AF3's ranking, he said something like, "You're just an academic, aren't you? If you run into space robbers without the protection of the military, you'll only get shot." When Gaga found out about it, he beat him up so badly that not even a pig would recognize him. He's just jealous of you. He's just as good as you. He gets excellent marks every time he takes his physical test, but he fails most of the other tests, especially the academic ones. Sigh, what the fuck, who said that academics are all weaklings? He hasn't seen you before, but if you were here, you'd beat him to the ground with one punch. Sillin listened to Belle's endless stream of curses about the affiliated schools. All he did was listen to him with a smile. Thank goodness he had this mission, or he would have been annoyed to death at school. The people from the affiliated schools, especially the rich young masters and ladies from AF3, were hard to deal with when they went crazy. "How many guards did you bring with you this time, Silen?" Bell asked worriedly after he was done talking about the affiliated schools. He knew that Silen didn't like to bring guards with him. "Just me and Wheeze." I see. Did you run into space robbers?" "There's no way, the Empire's patrols are everywhere." "No, I haven't run into any space robbers in the Mist Bodhisattva Empire yet." "What, are you afraid that the kid's words will come true?" "Sigh, he's just a jinx. Gaga wouldn't have beaten him into a pig's head otherwise." "Ahem, just be careful and run if you run into trouble." "Don't worry, I know that." After chatting for a while, Silen ended the call. "Space robbers, huh?" Hui Mao wagged its tail. "What a nostalgic feeling." Silen looked at Hui Mao, who was deep in thought, and shook his head. The cat's paws were itching again after sleeping too much lately. To Hui Mao's disappointment, they didn't encounter any space robbers even after they entered the 23rd star region. There were more patrols after they entered the 23rd star region, and security was much better. The chances of running into space robbers were pitifully low. What kind of space robber would be stupid enough to rob a place with more patrols? Silen's arrival didn't attract any attention. Since he wasn't a tourist ship, a transport ship, or a noble's fleet, he had to pass through the official surveillance point to enter the star region. If he was caught entering the 23rd star region without paying a toll or passing through the surveillance point, he would be charged and surrounded by the 23rd MR's army. The army usually didn't care if you lived or died. Cannon fire had no eyes, and you could only blame your bad luck if your spaceplane was blasted to smithereens by accident. Silen didn't ask for special permission this time. He passed through the official surveillance point through the normal route. After he arrived at the surveillance area, he accepted a call request and entered his identity information under the system prompt. At the surveillance point. "Yo, you're pretty free. You actually have time to come to our place." A man sitting in a high-level office at the surveillance point looked at the newcomer and teased. "I've been too fucking tired recently. I brought a bunch of new recruits and got a short vacation, so I came to your place to relax." The man sat down on the sofa in the office, grabbed the food on the table, and started eating. He keyed in the password to the storage cabinet and took out 2 bottles of wine. He tossed one bottle to the person opposite him and began to eat and drink leisurely with his legs crossed. As the two were talking, the communicator of the person sitting in front of the workbench rang. "Boss, we found a strange spaceplane." As he spoke, the image and information of the pilot were sent over. The person sitting at the desk didn't hide it from the person sitting on the sofa and directly put the image together. As soon as he saw the identity information, the person sitting on the sofa stood up. "Fuck, why is this kid here?" Chapter 304. Most of the people in the monitoring station area were transferred from the military. Just now, a retired soldier had scanned the area on a whim with the military scanning equipment. This kind of scanning equipment would estimate the overall combat power of every spaceship, starship, and transport ship, especially the defense equipment and weapon peripheral systems. As soon as they scanned, they found the data of Silen's spaceship. It almost blinded their eyes. Looking at the final estimated data, those who did not know would think that it was an analysis of the combined combat power of a fleet. If it was a noble's emblem, everyone wouldn't be so surprised. After all, the upper nobles also had such flying equipment. However, the problem was that the noble's emblem wasn't shown during identity verification, and the aircraft was a small one. He was neither a noble nor an important person. He seemed to have a mediocre background, and he was a young man. This was worth considering. Of course, no one would stop Silen because of this. After all, they were just curious as to whether or not he had violated any regulations. It was boring and mentally exhausting to do the same work every day, and they needed something new to refresh themselves. Moreover, the station chief had specifically told them to report it. "You know him?" The person in front of the desk asked when he saw that his old friend knew this guy. Yes, strange. What is this guy doing in the 23-star regions? People from your circle. He was referring to the noble circle. Not exactly. What do you mean not exactly? Hey, Tuo-sen, do you have to beat around the bush like this? Who is this kid? Is he a noble or not? The two were old comrades. However, the man had retired from the military to recuperate because of his injuries. After he recovered, he did not return to the military and was transferred to this monitoring station area to do a leisurely job. Tuo-sen would sometimes come to visit him and steal some snacks. Otherwise, how could he even know the password to the storage cabinet? Tuo-sen put down the bottle. Tell your men that I want to communicate with that kid. The man looked at Tuo-sen suspiciously, but he did not say much and ordered his men to connect. At this moment, Silen did not mind being scanned by the scanning equipment. He was not on a secret mission anyway. He was open and above board, and he was not afraid of suspicion. However, before he could fly the spaceship out of this monitoring area, he received a communication request from the monitoring station. Silen did not refuse. He clicked on the connection, and a familiar face appeared on the screen. Nahachi Tosen. Oh, he should be called Lieutenant Colonel Nahachi Tosen now. On his way here, Silen had seen some current information about the 23rd star region. There were a few familiar faces that he paid special attention to, and he also learned about Nahak Tosen, an old acquaintance he had met at Baron Bader Academy. When he and Bell first met Tuo-sen in Baron Bader, Tuo-sen was still a major, but he was promoted to lieutenant colonel so quickly. Even though he had a noble background, the main reason was his own ability. As expected of a member of the Nahachi family, one of the military giants. Seeing that Silen could still recognize him, Tuo-sen cut to the chase. I'm at the monitoring station now. Do you have time? If you have time, let's chat. I'm on vacation. This time, Tuo-sen didn't put on any airs. If Silen needed any help in the 23rd star field, then he would also lend a hand. Sure. Since there was still time, Silen did not refuse. He turned the spaceplane and flew directly to the main monitoring station Tuo-sen mentioned. Since Silen had already been informed, he was not stopped from entering the monitoring station. After a routine inspection, Silen was allowed to enter. Long time no see, Silen. Tuo-sen was very polite. He did not ask anyone to lead the way, but came himself. Long time no see, Lieutenant Colonel Tuo Sr., they arrived at a reception room. This was the reception room for the station commander. Tuo-sen brought Silen directly to this reception room, where the station commander was already sitting. Let me introduce you. This is Zhu Ming, the station commander and a former comrade of mine. Zhu Ming, this is Silen. Zhu Ming raised an eyebrow and looked at Tuo-senator. That's it. Just a name, no other introduction. Zhu Ming was quite polite to Silen. Although Tuo-sen did not introduce him too much, he was not as dull as he was when he first joined the army. How could someone who could be treated like this by Tuo-sen be of low status? AF1 is on vacation now. Tuo-sen asked Silen. His younger brother, Briles, was in AF3, so he would naturally pay attention to what was happening in the affiliated schools. He knew that there should be a period of relaxation after the first phase of testing. Not long ago, the zebra virus made everyone panic. However, there were no cases in the 23rd star region, which was at the edge of the region. Before the virus spread, it was already over. Therefore, other than some people who paid special attention to this area, other people's understanding of the zebra virus was just a joke. The 23rd military region also received limited orders at the time. They only increased the intensity of the testing, and not long after, they heard that the drug was out. Therefore, Tuo-sen did not know that Silen had done so many things. Zhu Ming was surprised to hear that Silen was from AF1. He was not very knowledgeable, but he knew about the famous affiliated schools of the empire, not to mention that Tuo-sen often talked about his good-for-nothing younger brother in AF3. Therefore, Zhu Ming knew very well that Silen was a person with real knowledge. Most of the students in AF3 were from noble families, and people of high status could go there just by saying hello. However, AF1 and AF2 were places where even princes couldn't do anything special. Everything depended on one's ability. Zhu Ming, who was just being polite just now, sat up straight. He used to be a soldier and didn't have much knowledge. Therefore, Zhu Ming admired those who had real talent, especially those who had real talent and didn't look down on others with their noses. So you're a talent from AF1. I admire people like you who are knowledgeable. Zhu Ming smiled. This smile was much more sincere. Oh right, Silen, what are you doing here? Visiting? Tuosen had investigated Silen before, so he knew about old Chang's situation. That's one of them. I'm here with a mission from my teacher. Tuosen looked understanding. He had heard that people from AF1 usually did not attend classes or complete missions from their teacher. Do you need any help? Not at the moment. My teacher said someone has already made arrangements here. Just contact them when the time comes. Good. If there's anything you need help with, just let me know. I'm still free during the holidays. Don't complain if you miss this opportunity, Tuosen said with a smile. The three of them talked about the recent events in the 23rd star region. Tuosen would not divulge anything related to the military, so he could only talk about the star region. As they talked about the famous San Colombo Advanced Education School in the 23rd star region. San Colombo Advanced Education School had never been ranked in the top 3 in the past 100 years, and it was once the top school in the 23rd star region. Oh right, I heard that San Colombo invited someone from the RAS to give a talk. San Colombo Advanced Education School is going to be popular again this year, Zhu Ming said. Oh. I've never heard of that. Tuosen had been busy all this time, so he did not have much time to pay attention to it. Only Zhu Ming, who had nothing better to do, would pay attention to it. Silen, do you know who's coming this time? What's the topic? Zhu Ming looked expectantly at Silen. It was rare for the RAS to announce a topic in advance, and this wasn't something the military could easily find out. Ahem, well, we haven't decided on the topic yet. It wasn't that Silen wanted to keep it a secret, but he really wasn't sure. He had prepared a couple of topics, but Guan Feng told him that it was fine. He just needed to choose the one that interested the most based on the situation. Therefore, Silen thought that he would investigate the topic himself before making a decision. Zhu Ming's eyes lit up at first. If Silen knew this kind of convenient information, then he must know a lot more. Which department of the Royal Academy of Sciences are they from? Who is it? Zhu Ming had always admired the RAS. He didn't think that he was very knowledgeable, but he hoped that he could learn more from the RAS so that he could teach his children more things in the future. He didn't want to be a boorish man in an elite uniform. If he couldn't stay in the military, he might as well learn more about other things. The older a person grew, the more they wanted to learn. Who is it? Silen rubbed his head, chuckled and pointed at himself. You flatter me. I'm still far from it. Both Tuosen and Zhu Ming's faces twitched at the same time. Zhu Ming didn't move for a long time. Is this a scam? Zhu Ming's image of a white-haired, scholarly man whose every word and action exuded wisdom and accomplishment was gone. Gone. Tuosen was just as surprised. Most of the RAS students were middle-aged, and there were a few freaks who had graduated from AF1 and AF2 who had gone there straight away. However, he didn't think that Silen would be the one who was invited. When did you join the RAS? Tuosen asked. Not long ago. My mentor sent me here to give a lecture in his place. You haven't graduated from AF1 yet, have you? No. Tuosen rubbed his hands together. So you're going to San Colombo to give a lecture? Silen nodded. Zhu Ming was stunned for a long time before he smiled awkwardly. The truth was too hard to believe. AF1 was one thing, but this was the RAS. Silen didn't want anyone here to know that someone from the RAS had arrived. He hoped that Tuo-sen and Zhu Ming would keep it a secret for the time being. Tuo-sen and Zhu Ming patted their chests as a guarantee. After chatting for a while, Silen left the monitoring station and flew to San Colombo Advanced Education Academy. After personally sending Silen off, Zhu Ming and Tuo-sen returned to the office. Zhu Ming didn't pay much attention to Silen's absence. He grabbed Tuo-sen and asked, "What kind of monster is that kid? He's so young, only in his early 20s, right? Does that mean he's an honorary scholar of the RAS? I always thought that honorary scholars of the RAS were middle-aged or old men." Tuo-sen shook his head. "I'm not sure either. I only know that he's in AF1, and he's very strong. Also, if he wants his surname to be Zhen, he can be." Zhu Ming took a deep breath. The Zhen that Tuo-sen mentioned referred to the royal family of Foggy. If Silen was willing, he could be a member of the royal family. Fuck. Zhu Ming only managed to squeeze out a word after a long time. Why was there such a huge difference between people? No, I have to take a leave first. I'll go to San Colombo and see what that kid is talking about, Zhu Ming said. In the past, he had always watched famous researchers and scholars from all over the world give talks on the internet. He had always thought that listening to a talk could be done just by watching it on the internet. Why would he put down his work and go sit with a group of people to listen to a talk? But now, Zhu Ming really wanted to go and see for himself how capable that kid was to climb to such a level and obtain such a title that many academic researchers struggled for their entire lives. After checking the time and arranging his vacation, Tuo-sen put down his wine bottle and said, "All right, let's go see if he's the real deal." The RAS wasn't a place you could enter just because you had connections, and it wasn't a place that ordinary nobles could meddle with. They didn't give face to anyone other than the emperor and the three kings. Perhaps the people in the capital Star region wouldn't be too surprised, but outside of it, the people of the RAS were like rare treasures. It was hard to even catch a glimpse of them, and they had a lot of admirers. Silen flew to San Colombo Advanced Education Academy. He didn't contact the school because he wanted to see the academic atmosphere and inclination here first. San Colombo was a famous school in the Mist Bodhisattva Empire. This planet was called San Colombo, and it was founded by a noble with the surname Colombo. At the time, Colombo wasn't a big noble yet. It was just a normal noble that had just risen to power. Later, it slowly rose to the status of a big noble due to its contributions to the stability of the empire. Although Colombo could be considered an upper-class noble now, its glory days were long gone. The Colombo family had always supported the school, and it had raised a lot of talented people for the family. The school took up half of San Colombo's surface area. Any big school would pay a lot of attention to the layout of the buildings, especially the scenery. There were a lot of garden-like buildings, picnicking forests, plazas, and parks around the dormitories. The hardware was also very good at keeping up with the technology. The amount of effort a school could put into its facilities was proof of how much effort it put into educating its students. Many schools would rather spend a lot of money to renovate the terrain and environment, making the campus scenery incomparably gorgeous and the buildings brilliant. However, when it came to real teaching, they would always cut corners. Golden on the outside, but rotten on the inside. Flashy but impractical education was simply difficult to cultivate outstanding talents. There were still a few days before the lecture. Although there weren't many people from other planets on San Colombo's campus, there were already many signs on the light screens, "Welcome to the RAS." They didn't mention whether the person was an academician or an honorary scholar. They probably didn't know that the probability of becoming an academician and an honorary scholar was 150. Since they didn't know, they didn't dare to say anything. Perhaps it was due to the fact that the Royal Academy of Sciences had sent someone over to give a speech, but most of the advertisements on the screen were about the research results of the students in the university, as well as the awards they had won. The atmosphere here was pretty good. There were some students sitting on the wooden chairs and chatting with each other. There were also students who were reading their course notes on their laptops. There were also people who were fishing by the side of the lake. Splash! A fish leaped out of the lake. Huimao's attention was immediately drawn to it. Silen, let's go fishing. There were many fish in the lake. There were a few shops around the lake that rented fishing gear. However, after renting the gear, they would take a percentage of the fish they caught. Most people only enjoyed the process. They didn't have much of a complaint about how many fish they caught and how much they let the rental point take. At Huimao's request, Silen rented a set of fishing gear from one of the shops. Then, he started walking around the lake in search of a fishing spot. It was noon, and it would be lunchtime soon. Silen had arrived late. Many of the good fishing spots had already been taken, so he had to walk further. There were boats floating on the lake. They were all small boats for the students to have fun. It was a good place for couples to go for a little tryst. There were security personnel and robots guarding the area. If someone fell into the water or met with an accident, they would be able to react in time. No one was worried. Some people liked to rent a boat and fish. Silen didn't know what the result was. We saw a lot of people catching fish along the way. The size of the fish aside, it was still considered a catch. As long as they managed to catch a fish, they would feel proud of themselves and that their trip here wasn't a wasted one. Huimao scanned the distribution of the fish in the lake. The fish in the surroundings were too small. The ones in the center of the lake were bigger. So, he suggested, Silen, why don't we rent a boat and fish in the center of the lake? The fish there are bigger. How can the small fish around be enough to fill the gaps between our teeth? That works. Anyway, Silen treated it as a relaxing activity. It didn't matter where they went. Since Huimao suggested it, they would go to the center of the lake. They rented a small boat. When it was rented, it didn't look like a boat. It looked like a door, but after it was unfolded, it looked like a boat. The robot helped Silen send the boat to the other side of the lake. After paying the robot for the service, Silen and Weiss jumped onto the boat, turned on the navigation system, adjusted the boat's speed, and popped out a canopy. While he was at it, he unfolded 2 folding chairs and sat there, staring leisurely at the lake. Fishing trained patience, but Huimao obviously wasn't patient when it came to fishing. The fishing gear was too troublesome. After playing for a while, he jumped into the lake to catch fish. He even chased the fish living at the bottom of the lake up, causing people to appear around him with nets to catch the fish. Not far away, a few boats carrying students also let out cries of surprise. The boat moved automatically, and Silen got closer and closer to them. When he got closer, some students greeted Silen. Silen just smiled and responded. It seemed that they treated him as a student here. Chapter 305. After the students and Silen smiled and waved the fish in their hands, the boats of both parties staggered. Weiss had chased the shoals of fish at the bottom of the lake all over the place. Naturally, a lot of people on the shore had noticed the movement of the shoals, and many of them had carried portable scanners with them. There were also some people who liked to use scanners to observe the distribution of the shoals of fish in the lake so that they could place their bait better. But now, they were using nets to cast the bait instead of fishing rods. Most people fishing was just for fun and to pass the time. However, when they encountered such a good opportunity, they wouldn't let it go. Those who didn't have nets immediately called over robots to buy small nets. There were also children with scanners tugging at the sleeves of adults and shouting where a big fish had just gone. Silen didn't use a net. He continued to fish with a fishing rod and didn't join in the fun. In fact, when the fish in the lake were frightened and chaotic, fishing like this wouldn't attract any fish at all. Silen didn't really plan to go fishing. He didn't know how many fish Huimao had eaten in the lake. No matter what, he was still taking advantage of the situation. Silen's boat gradually came to a shallow area. There were many stones here, but there weren't any big fish. It was also far from the boulevard, and usually, there weren't many people here. When he looked over, Silen saw a guy lying on a big rock, basking in the sun. Silen put down his fishing rod, took out a net, and stopped the boat. He didn't let the boat get too close to the rock, which would make it easy for the guy to escape. After adjusting the rope on the net, he looked at the target and threw it quickly. Once the net reached the target, it automatically closed, and the guy who was about to jump into the water to escape was firmly trapped inside. He pressed the button in his hand, and the rope was retracted. Soon, Silen held the net that trapped the target in his hand. This guy was nearly half a meter long and was very heavy. It was a big turtle. There were some golden patterns on the back of this turtle. It was a mutated species of ordinary turtle. Many people like to raise this kind of turtle. The small traders said that this kind of turtle symbolized wealth, or else it wouldn't be so popular. There were many modified species created by genetic engineering, but there were very few natural species. However, the natural species looked domineering. Although they would run away when they saw people, when you really caught them, they would stare at you with their eyes wide open, and their limbs would keep waving. The mutated mouth with a hard horn would bite down as long as there was an opportunity, unlike other tortoises that retracted their head, limbs, and tail into the shell. Silen hadn't done too much research on this type of turtle, and he had only occasionally seen some introductions in an aquatic pet magazine. Looking at the golden threads on the turtle's back, he heard that it was possible to determine a golden silk turtle's age based on the golden thread patterns on its back. Silen looked. The golden patterns combined with the patterns on the turtle's back were not bad, but he didn't know how to tell the age of the turtle. Silen knocked on the turtle's shell. Sure enough, the shell of a naturally bred golden thread turtle was hard. This knock also angered the golden thread turtle. Its mouth with curved hooks bit the net that tied it up twice. If the net was not firm and replaced with a normal fishing net, it would have been bitten through. Looking at the golden thread turtle, which was kicking its limbs and staring at him, Silen didn't untie the net. Instead, he threw the golden thread turtle on the boat with the net attached. There were two strange-looking small fish in the fish bucket. Huimao had thrown them up. If the golden thread turtle was placed together with the two small fish, the fish would probably enter the golden thread turtle's stomach in less than 5 seconds. Although he didn't catch any fish, it was still a big gain to catch this big guy. According to the introduction in the pet magazine, the price of a golden thread turtle that was not even half the size of the one in his hand had reached 5 digits. In this case, the turtle in his hand was worth several buckets of fish. Huimao caught a round of fish at the bottom of the lake and returned to the boat. He shook his hair and saw the struggling golden thread turtle that Silen had placed upside down on the boat. We circled around the golden thread tortoise and slapped it with its paw. The golden thread tortoise bit its paw when it tried to slap the tortoise's head, but Wiz wasn't afraid at all. Even this kind of thing would have a hard time biting through its paw. Therefore, Huimao raised his claws with interest and looked at the guy that refused to let go. He said to Silen, "Did you catch this turtle?" "I just caught it with the net over there." Silen pointed to the shallow water with his chin. Huimao sniffed the golden thread turtle. "Doesn't seem to be very tasty." "I don't know if it's tasty, but the price of this guy is definitely not less than 5 buckets of fish." Hearing that this guy was worth so much, Huimao was happy. That's good. For the rest of the time, Huimao didn't care about the fish in the lake anymore. He stayed on the boat and played with the golden thread turtle. "Hey, Silen, look at the patterns on the turtle's shell. They are flashing." Silen looked over. He didn't notice it at first, but now he noticed that the golden threads on the turtle's back were flashing. When they were at their brightest, they were like sunlight. "It is absorbing solar energy," Huimao said after looking carefully for a while. It was exhausted from struggling, so it was using the golden threads to absorb energy to replenish itself. This mutated species is quite special. After playing for a while, Silen let the boat sail back. Because many people had caught fish today, people could be seen talking and laughing everywhere. Whether it was the anglers or the owners of fishing gear rentals, they were all happily talking about the interesting things that happened today. When Silen arrived, many people had returned their fishing gear and boats. After settling the interest, some left, while those who stayed gathered together to talk. Someone saw that there were two strange-looking fish in Silen's bucket. The locals could recognize these two kinds of fish. They were both ferocious fish, but they tasted good. But no matter how good the taste was, there were only two fish. That was nothing. Especially when everyone returned with a full load today. So when some people saw Silen's fish bucket, they looked at him with disdain, as if they were looking at a rookie. But when we dragged the net bag with the golden-threaded tortoise inside, everyone's eyes immediately widened. Ignoring the others who were still talking and laughing, the people who saw the golden thread turtle ran over to take a closer look. Hui Mao looked at the people who came over and let out a warning growl. "If you dare to have any ideas about this turtle, I will scratch you to death." But no one cared about Hui Mao. After taking a closer look and confirming that it was the golden thread turtle, someone shouted, "Fuck! 100-year-old golden thread turtle. This size is definitely 100-year-old golden thread turtle. I heard that golden thread turtles used to live in this lake, but I didn't think it was true." Some people who weren't afraid of death couldn't help but reach out and touch the turtle. They didn't mind even when Hui Mao scratched them a few times. Knowing that the cat followed its master, they all blocked Silen's way, afraid that Silen wouldn't know what it was and would sell the turtle to those unscrupulous rental shops. "Kid, is that your golden thread turtle?" "Hey, I saw it first." Don't push. "I'll give you 100,000 MB for your golden thread turtle, how about it?" "Fuck off, I'll give you 150,000. These people didn't look like they lacked money. 100,000 MB was like 10 RMB to them. Moreover, these people had the demeanor of a scholar before, but now that they saw something good, they didn't care about their demeanor anymore. They all blew their beards and glared at each other, afraid that they would fall behind. A few even older grandpas also walked over quickly. They might be old, but their steps were steady. Still, they didn't expect to be this fast at their age. The old man who came over hit the people blocking his way with his walking stick. "Out of the way, out of the way." Silen was amused. These people obviously knew each other, and even the youngest among them was already middle-aged. Although the old man was hitting them with his walking stick, he didn't kill them. A few people rubbed their arms exaggeratedly and complained bitterly, but they still obediently moved out of the way. There was no malice in their eyes, as if they had expected this. They were all good-natured bickering. Silen could see that these people didn't intend to steal the turtle directly, but their desire to buy it was very strong. It was obvious that they really liked it. "Hey, Grandpa's son is here," someone said. "Professor White. You two haven't left yet, have you?" The group of people who had been surrounding them said with bitter expressions. "Humph. What, you want this old man to leave early and miss out on this good thing?" Grandpa's son picked up his walking stick and hit the speaker twice, causing him to let out a strange yelp. The people around them were already used to it. After the few old men came over, the middle-aged people around them stopped yelling and formed a circle to prevent others from squeezing in. What a joke. The old men were the elders, and it was not good for them to chase them away. As for the other kids, they shouldn't come over to make trouble. If someone wanted to buy it at a sky-high price, the few of them wouldn't be able to enjoy it. There was no lack of young masters from rich families in the school. It would be a waste for this treasure to fall into their hands. However, these people respected the old men, and Hui Mao didn't care. It only knew that this turtle could be exchanged for a lot of fish biscuits, and it would scratch whoever tried to steal it to death. It really is a golden thread turtle. It should be 100 years old. The person called Grandpa's son said. Everyone was very convinced by the words of this Grandpa Sunday. This old man was a veteran in this field. Not bad, not bad. It's still very energetic. Old Professor White used the walking stick in his hand to knock on the shell of the golden thread turtle, but the golden thread turtle suddenly opened its mouth and bit it tightly. Old Professor White tried to pull it out a few times, but he still couldn't get it out. Hui Mao glanced at the two old men who dared to use their walking sticks to poke its treasure. If it wasn't for Silin stopping it, it would have already torn their walking sticks apart. Oh! Wow, it's really energetic. This is definitely not a genetically engineered turtle, someone said. The other heads nodded in agreement. Old Professor White, who had his walking stick bitten, didn't get angry. Instead, he started to play with the golden thread turtle as if he had found something interesting. The joy in his eyes grew stronger and stronger. How many years has it been since I've seen this kind of natural turtle? Grandpa's son sighed. Young man, did you catch this in the lake today? The special structure of the turtle's back, especially the golden stripes, allowed the golden thread turtle to avoid the scanning of scanners. Therefore, generally speaking, it was very difficult to find a golden thread turtle. Genetically engineered golden thread turtles were easy to find, but natural ones were even more difficult to find. Someone once used a scanners to explore the entire lake, but they only found 2 small turtles. Not long after, those 2 small turtles also died. Since then, no one had seen a golden thread turtle in the lake. Unexpectedly, Silin had fished out such a big one today. Following Grandpa's son's words, everyone turned their attention to Silin, who was holding a bucket with only 2 small fish in it. This is mine. Silin told them the place to catch the turtle, and everyone present recorded it down. Those who knew that they had a bad memory turned on the recording equipment they brought with them, afraid that they would miss a word. Then, they might be able to catch one themselves. Do you know the value of this golden thread turtle? Grandpa's son looked at Silin. Although his smile was very kind, there was an invisible aura about him. Although there was no malice, it made people feel a sense of awe. I don't know too much about this. I just happened to see it once in a marine pet magazine. Celine told him about the report in the magazine. Grandpa's son nodded. Can I take a closer look? Now everyone knew that Hui Mao, who was holding the net bag in its mouth, was not a kind person. If you wanted to touch the turtle, you needed to get the owner's permission, or else you would be scratched. Sure. Silin gestured for Hui Mao to put down the net bag. Hui Mao looked around unkindly and unwillingly let go of the net bag. However, he did not walk away. Instead, he squatted beside the net bag, as if guarding a sheep against a wolf. Grandpa's son, White, and a few other old men immediately put on their identification equipment and began to carefully study the golden thread turtle. When Silin saw these old men take out the equipment they carried, his face twitched. It seemed that these people usually carried their tools with them. While the old men were studying it, the people around them did not make a sound and quietly waited for the identification results. These old men were all authorities in this area. When they said the results, everyone would have an idea, so they waited nervously for the identification results. Silin looked at the people around him who were so nervous that it was like they were waiting for the results of a large-scale examination. He found it a little funny. Hui Mao watched as these old men took out all kinds of strange tools and turned the golden thread turtle over and over. He swung his tail impatiently. Finally, Grandpa's son was the first to stand up. Although he was a little tired, his eyes were full of excitement. 98 years. It's a 98-year golden thread turtle. Everyone believed old man son's words without a doubt. That's right. It's a 98-year turtle, and it's going to be 99 years soon. The other old men also finished their work. 98 years. If he raised it for another 2 years, no, a little more than a year, he would be able to raise a 100-year-old golden thread turtle. When that time came, he would be very proud. There was also a rumor that people who raised a 100-year-old turtle would be rich and lucky. Silin guessed that those rumors were deliberately spread by the peddlers, but there were many enthusiasts in this area, so everyone was willing to believe it. Young man, is this turtle ready to make a move? Grandpa's son looked at Silin. Silin thinks for a moment and shook his head. He was not short of money, but this kind of natural turtle was really rare. he would raise it himself. Seeing Silen like this, the people around him showed a disappointed look. Some people did not give up and offered a high price of nearly $1 million, but Silen still refused. In the end, Grandpa's son stopped everyone's discussion and said to Silen, "Since you are not willing to make a move, we will not force you. However, we really want this turtle. How about this, let's make a deal." Grandpa's son discussed with Silen and decided to keep the turtle with them for 2 days to study and return it after 2 days. They also signed a contract. Originally, Silen said that there was no need to sign a contract, but the few old men refused and insisted that it had to be signed. Otherwise, they would not be at ease. Silen laughed, "All right, let's do that." After the contract was signed, the golden thread turtle was placed with Grandpa's Sunday. Grandpa's son gave his address and contact details to Silen. When the time came, Silen would go and look for him. As they were talking, Grandpa's son suddenly asked, "You are not from our school?" "No, I'm here because of that RAS professor's lecture," Silen said. Speaking of this, the people around them looked proud. If someone from the RAS came to give a speech, it meant that the school was valued by the RAS. Of course, they would be proud if their school had such an honor. Most of the people around them were teachers from San Colombo. Some of them had grown up in San Colombo, especially people like Grandpa's son and Professor White. These old men had devoted most of their lives to San Colombo. Their feelings for San Colombo were incomprehensible to outsiders. San Colombo was not the best, and there were many shortcomings. However, in their hearts, it was the most important school. Even the affiliated schools were not as important as San Colombo. When San Colombo received the letter of approval from the RAS, they held a celebration party. On the day the letter of approval was issued, San Colombo sent out the news. Who knew how many schools were envious of him? At the same time, many people started to book hotel and conference tickets for San Colombo. Although Silen did not see many people coming today, most of the places were already booked. Many people couldn't get a hotel room even if they offered a high price. Even though many people from other planets couldn't attend the conference in person and couldn't book a hotel room, they still came to experience the festive atmosphere of San Colombo. Silen did not know that his decision would cause such a big change in San Colombo. Because some people from other planets had come to San Colombo recently, when Silen admitted that he was not from San Colombo, everyone naturally thought that Silen had the same goal as the people who came to experience the atmosphere. Seeing everyone's expression, Silen did not deny it. He just smiled and did not say anything. Grandpa's son pulled up a map of San Colombo's campus, pointed to his house, and said, "I live here. You can go there and get your turtle. I won't go back on my word. If you don't have time, you can contact me directly. My name is Sun Fu. Just tell me my name. Everyone in San Colombo knows me." After negotiating with Silen, Grandpa's son hurriedly asked his housekeeping robot to deliver a box. He carefully put the golden thread turtle in the net bag. He didn't waste time talking to the others. He got on the flying car that came to pick him up and left in a hurry. A few old men who were on good terms with Grandpa's son also got on their flying cars and chased after him. Silen left the place with the gray cat after completing the procedures and returning the items. That day, the news of the 98-year-old golden thread turtle in San Colombo's lake spread. Chapter 306. Silen and Huimao didn't stay on the other side of the lake. Soon, they took the school bus to another area. There were no more hotels to stay in. Many local residents would rent rooms at a high price, but Silen didn't plan on renting one. He and Huimao could spend the night lying on the wooden chairs in the square. After eating something, Silen and Huimao spent the night in a small park on campus. In fact, Huimao preferred to roll around on the grass. Silen didn't mind it. The little guy snacked on insects in the grass. The next morning, the weather was good. Silen arrived at his destination, the bookstore. A school's bookstore showed the school's style and history. The school's library wasn't open to the public, but Silen didn't mind. Many rare books could be found in the RAS stacks and databases. He just wanted to find a random bookstore to see the style of San Colombo and the students' hobbies. He wanted to know which topic he would choose to talk about. It was still early, but there were already some students in the bookstore quietly reading books. These students didn't look like nobles, and they didn't have any noble emblems. They didn't have powerful backgrounds, and they didn't have extraordinary talents. This meant that they would need to spend more time studying. Silen looked at the books on the bookshelf. Although a lot of them were purely electronic, the process of reading would leave a deeper impression on one's memory. Many people liked to hold a book in their hands and make notes while reading. This was a process of memory strengthening, and not everyone had a memory like Silen. Silen looked at the books on the bookshelf. He had a general idea of the style of San Colombo. He chose a book about local customs and customs. Then, Silen went to the reading area and sat with the students. Of course, Silen's goal wasn't just to read. He looked at the books in the hands of the students and chatted with the people around him about the contents of the books. The others treated Silen as a student of San Colombo. They complained to each other about the difficulties they had recently encountered, and they would respond to Silen's questions. After sitting for 3 hours, around lunchtime, Silen bought a book and left the bookstore. He called Hui Mao, who was teasing the sparrows in the woods, and left the bookstore. They found a restaurant that was quite popular among the students to eat and drink afternoon tea. This restaurant wasn't the most popular, but pets were allowed in this restaurant. When Silen arrived, it wasn't the restaurant's peak hour, but there weren't many empty seats. They came to an empty table for two in the corner and ordered some snacks and food. Most of the service staff were not robots, but students who were doing part-time jobs here. A 17 or 18-year-old girl dressed in a restaurant uniform served food to Silen's table. At the same time, she was considerate enough to install a small cat chair on the table. Silen ordered fish fillet, dried fish, seafood porridge, etc. for Hui Mao. This restaurant's fish steak was pretty good, and it was also one of the most popular dishes. Smack! A piece of fish steak fell into the bowl of a guy who was bragging to someone at a table. There were 7 or 8 people at that table, both men and women. The guy who was bragging felt that he had lost face in front of his female classmates. How dare someone pick a fish steak into his bowl? This was outrageous. Whose fish steak is it? That person stood up and looked around, but no one paid attention to him, and no one said anything. After all, many tables had ordered fish steaks, and a few tables were occupied by children. No one could tell which table had been chosen by that person. Seeing that the beautiful girls around him were still laughing with their hands over their mouths, the guy was so angry that his face turned green. He called the waiter over and asked to see the surveillance video. After a while, the waiter took out the surveillance footage for them to see, probably because he was worried about that person's identity. However, strangely enough, there was nothing suspicious on it at all. Then, the fish steak suddenly fell into his bowl. The guy was still grumbling, but he couldn't find anything suspicious. In the end, he had to give up. Silen stared at the gray cat who was earnestly licking the seafood porridge in front of him. The fellow's ears were perked up and facing the direction of the table, and there was not a single piece of fish left on the plate. Just now, this guy had accidentally thrown the fish steak out of his mouth when he was using his claws to fork it. However, the restaurant's surveillance video was nothing in front of Hui Mao, so it was impossible to find the truth from the video. Silen held a cup of tea in his hand, and as he drank, he read the book he had bought. At this moment, a few more people walked into the dining hall. Celine looked over as if she sensed something. Oh, it's an old acquaintance again. Sensing Silen's gaze, the other person also looked over. Big bro Silen. It was Chang Little Four. Although Chang Little Four's current school wasn't San Colombo, it wasn't any worse. This time, he had heard that San Colombo had invited someone from the RAS to give a lecture, so he had dropped what he was doing and come with his classmates. When he saw Silen, Chang Little Four greeted his classmates and walked over to Silen. He didn't know too much about Silan. He knew that Silan had run into Linani at Uliganuo's cousin's wedding, but Linani didn't tell him too much about it because Silan had instructed her not to. All she knew was that Silan was currently at AF1. Hello, Wheeze. Chang Little 4 had become more cheerful and confident. Although he still had a young face, he had matured a lot. To be able to enter an advanced education school at such a young age, his abilities couldn't be ignored. Hui Mao raised his head and looked at him. He shook his beard to show that he understood, then continued to lick his seafood porridge. Silan pulled out another chair for Chang Little 4 to sit in. He hadn't expected to run into Chang Little 4 here. Big bro Silan, what are you doing here? I heard from Linani. AF1, you're my idol. Chang Little 4's eyes sparkled. I had some business to attend to. I'll stay in San Colombo for a few days for the lecture, then I'll come visit you guys, Silan replied with a smile. Chang Little 4 didn't think too much about it. He didn't even think that Silan would be here to give a lecture. My classmates and I are also here to listen to the lecture, but we booked a hotel in advance. Otherwise, we'd be sleeping in the park by now. We slept in the park last night, Hui Mao raised his head and said without the slightest bit of embarrassment. Ahem, big bro Silan, why don't you come with us? We have a lot of people, so we can squeeze a bit to get a seat. It's only a few days anyway. Besides, we'll only be sleeping at night. It's fine, don't worry about me. If I really need it, I can find a place no matter what. Chang Little 4 thought about it. He had never heard of anyone in AF1 worrying about this. Besides, there weren't any poor students in AF1. Many people knew about the treatment of affiliated schools, and the most enviable of all was their treatment. We'll go to San Colombo's Thousand Flower Garden after dinner. Big bro Silan, do you want to come with us later? Chang Little 4 asked expectantly. Thousand Flower Garden was one of San Colombo's most famous scenic spots. Everyone who came to San Colombo would visit a few of the city's most famous scenic spots. Otherwise, it would be a shame. Since he didn't have much to do, Silan agreed. Chang Little 4's classmates ranged from 12 to 13 years old to nearly 20 years old. It wasn't unusual. It was common to see such things in advanced education schools. At first, Chang Little 4's classmates looked down on Silan. After all, Silan wasn't wearing a noble emblem, and Silan was a bit older than Chang Little 4. They were both in advanced education schools, but one was in his 20s, while the other was in his teens. Everyone thought that Silan's abilities were mediocre. However, when they heard that Silan was from AF1, their attitudes immediately changed. Some admired him, some envied him, and some were jealous. But Silan didn't bother to argue with them. As they were talking, Chang Little 4's communicator rang. After a while, Chang Little 4 said to everyone, "They're here. Let's go." They Chang Little 4 mentioned were from the same school as him. The one who had just spoken to him was Linani. Most of the people in San Colombo's Thousand Flower Garden were outsiders. It was likely that the people from the same school had already seen this place countless times. Little 4. As soon as Chang Little 4 and the others got out of the car and entered Thousand Flower Garden, someone hurried over. It was none other than Linani. She wasn't dressed in extravagant clothes, but her fresh appearance and pretty face were enough to attract a lot of people. Even though she was just a little girl, the family emblem she wore was enough to attract a lot of attention. However, she was a noble, so they couldn't act too rashly. Linani, who was waiting at the entrance, was annoyed by the few people who were trying to strike up a conversation with her. When she saw Chang 4 and the others get out of the car, she ignored them and picked up her floral dress as she strode towards them. "Who's that guy?" There was a group of people not far away. One of them had just put on his noble emblem and was about to approach Linani, but Linani's overly courteous demeanor was completely gone. She ran over to him with a smile. "I'm afraid you guys don't know this, but that kid in front of us is the one Linani flirted with despite his noble status. He's just a commoner, and Linani really doesn't care about her status. I can't believe a noble like her is so infatuated with that kid that she's forgotten her own name, said Sharapova. Oh, Sharapova, you're not saying sour grapes, are you? Said another noble lady sarcastically. Sharapova's expression froze for a moment, then turned into one of disdain. No way. How can nobles like that commoner? You think everyone's as stupid as Linani? TSK, I thought it was something else. The noble young master glanced at the noble emblem he was wearing out of the corner of his eye, then looked at Chang Si who was chatting with Linani intimately. His eyes clouded over. Killing that brat is as easy as killing an ant. Don't go too far. I heard Chang Little Four is a commoner, but he has a backer, said another noble. A backer? Even if he does, can he be more powerful than cousin? Everyone turned to look at the person standing in the middle of the group and fell silent. Linani ignored everyone else out of habit. After talking to Chang Little Four for a while, she turned to Chang Little Four's classmates and told them about the day's schedule. However, when she turned to look at Silan, she froze and reflexively bowed. Your Highness, Silan, long time no see, Linani. Silan stopped Linani before she could finish her bow. Not far away, the group was discussing how to teach Chang Little Four a lesson when the person in the middle saw Linani's movement. He stopped twirling his cup and asked in a low voice, Who's that? The people around them said they didn't know, but Sharapova thought for a moment and remembered. He's Chang Little Four's brother or something. He used to visit Chang Little Four at school. She suddenly remembered something horrifying and paled. Tisk, he's just a commoner. The noble young master swallowed the rest of his words when his cousin, who was standing in the middle, glared at him. Continue, Sharapova. Say what you know. Thomas didn't even look at the others. He kept his eyes on the people at the entrance of Myriad Flower View Garden. In the past, Chang Little Four and the others were friends with the Prince of the Fire Eagle royal family. Many people did not agree with Chavarissa's words. How could a commoner be able to be friends with His Royal Highness? They'd only exchanged a few words at most. How could they be friends with the prince? Continue. Thomas shouted in a low voice, interrupting the discussion. Seeing that Thomas was about to lose his temper, the others didn't say anything. Sharapova didn't know much about what happened in Balenbader back then. She only told them what she knew, and most of it was just rumors. Thomas's eyes flickered. It wouldn't be a big deal if that person was friends with the royal family. After all, there were many nobles who were friends with the royal family. However, he clearly saw that Linani's unfinished bow was an etiquette for a member of the royal family. Not counting on the idiots around him, Thomas walked over with his cup in hand. However, there were too many people with Silan's group, so he decided to follow them for now and find a chance to test them later. With Thomas's warning, the others didn't act rashly. However, just because they didn't go over didn't mean that Silan didn't know that they were being watched. It was just that Silan wasn't in the mood to pay attention to them. With Silan around, Linani was a lot more restrained. Others might not know, but she knew how important Silan was. Even now, she still didn't know who Silan was, but someone who could call Prince Windiska by his nickname and hang out with the other three princes so casually. Seeing that Linani was a lot quieter after Silan appeared, everyone thought it was because she was shy to see Chang Little Four's family. Little did they know that Linani's back was drenched in cold sweat. Especially when the girls made fun of Silan. Linani's face paled, and she carefully watched Silan's expression. She didn't know anything in the past, but ever since that incident, Linani's reverence for Silan was clearly excessive. The Garden of 10,000 Flowers was indeed beautiful, and it was a landscape garden that had been built over hundreds of years. Although it could not be compared to the natural landscape planet of Gaga's cousin's house, in this era where technology had brought about a high degree of artificial decoration, the natural landscape with a long history had become a precious treasure. After all, Thousand Flower Garden wasn't as stunning anymore. However, Chang Little Four and the others were happy to see it. They even took pictures as souvenirs. After watching for a while with Chang Little Four, Silan's communicator rang. Silen greeted Chang Little Four and walked to a quiet place nearby to answer the call. As soon as Silen left, the girls asked Little Four about Silen. In terms of looks, Silen was above average, and he wasn't too distant from others. He looked like a gentleman. Don't talk about things you shouldn't talk about. Linani shouted. What's wrong, Linani? The girls found Linani's reaction strange, but she refused to say anything. Chang Little Four stared thoughtfully at Silen not far away. Guan Feng was the one who was looking for Silen. Since San Colombo hadn't received any communication from Silen yet, they were worried that the invitation would be cancelled. They nervously asked the RAS's administrators for an answer, and the administrators contacted Guan Feng in hopes that he could give them a definite answer. Otherwise, the people of San Colombo wouldn't be able to rest easy. After all, they had already advertised and promoted the invitation. Wouldn't it be a slap in the face and a joke if the invitation was cancelled? After he hung up with Silen, Guan Feng informed the school that the people they had sent were already in the city. The higher-ups of the school panicked. This wasn't like this before. Why did they sneak into San Colombo without a word? Too many people had entered San Colombo recently, so they hadn't been able to find out who exactly it was. Guan Feng didn't divulge any information either. He only told them that he would contact them when the time came. No worries. How is that possible? That's even more worrying. Is the RAS going to make a secret visit? If they angered this esteemed guest of the RAS, San Colombo's reputation would plummet. It would greatly affect San Colombo's ranking in the 23rd star region. Thomas, who was watching from the other side, couldn't figure out which family Celine belonged to no matter how hard he tried. He had studied the members of the royal family before, but there was no such person in his memories. Just as Thomas was deep in thought, a voice interrupted him. Thomas. What are you doing? The newcomer was a nobleman who studied at San Colombo. His status couldn't be lower than Thomas's. Thomas thanked the newcomer but didn't say anything. Suddenly, Thomas smiled and called out to the person who was about to leave. He pointed in the direction Silen was standing and asked, "Do you know who that person is?" Hong Shi stared suspiciously at Thomas's sudden change of expression. He looked in the direction Thomas was pointing at. "Who are you talking about? Which one? Don't tell me you've fallen for a kid who hasn't even grown up yet, Thomas. You won't even let a kid go, fuck me." Hong Shi waved Thomas away before he could finish his sentence. He sprinted toward the direction Thomas was pointing at while shouting, "Ah, my idol. My idol." Silen had just ended the call and was wondering if he should contact the school when he saw the head of a colorful airplane running toward him. He looked around and noticed that Silen was the only person within range. Who the hell is that? Chapter 307. Looking at the guy in front of him who was wearing blinding clothes, had colorful hair, a shiny noble emblem, and was smiling like an idiot, Celine tried hard to recall who this guy was, but he still couldn't figure out who this guy was. Airplane Head was panting heavily after he ran in front of Silen. His face was so excited that it was a little red. You're Silen. The Silen who's driving Vegfritter. Silen glanced suspiciously at the jet in front of him before nodding, "I am. This is great. I finally got to meet my idol." The pilot jumped up and down excitedly. Then, he rubbed his hands, straightened his clothes, and performed a normal noble salute. It wasn't the kind of salute Lunani would give a royal descendant, but a normal noble salute. Even though it was just a normal noble salute, the person who saluted him was full of admiration. After listening to Hong Shi for a while, Silen finally understood why the guy knew him. Hong Shi was a flying car enthusiast himself, and he had attended the grand flying car race held by the Sizer family. However, there were too many nobles and upper-class nobles there, and Hong Shi's family wasn't in the upper class. He didn't have any connections, so he wasn't able to attend the race with Zhen Xingming and the others. There were so many people watching the race, so Silen didn't pay attention to every corner of the stands. After learning the whole story, Silen smiled and chatted with Hong Shi for a while. Then, he excused himself and went to Chang Little Four's place. "You know him, Hong Shi?" Thomas came over and asked. Hong Shi was still staring at Silen with admiration. He said, "He's my idol." "Do you know why veg fritter is so popular right now?" Thomas thought for a moment before looking at Hong Shi. "Because of him." Thomas wasn't a flying car enthusiast, but he would occasionally pay attention to large flying car races. He had heard about the rise of veg fritter. "If I remember correctly, that race was mainly because of Naimi of the Sizer family, wasn't it?" Thomas said. "What do you know?" "Naimi is just the navigator, Silen is the driver." "Do you understand what a driver is?" It was exactly because Hong Shi was crazy about flying cars that he wanted to learn more about them. "Silen? What's his background?" "I don't think he's wearing a noble emblem." Most nobles would wear noble emblems when they were outside. Of course, some people didn't wear them because they found it troublesome or preferred to keep a low profile. "I don't know about that. But after the race, I saw him with the three princes. They looked really close." Thomas's eyebrows shot up when he heard Hong Shi's words. Silen didn't care what the people behind him were saying. He checked the time and realized that it was about time to contact San Colombo. After bidding farewell to Chang Little Four and the others, Silen left Myriad Flower View Garden with the gray cat and arrived at a relatively quiet park. There weren't many people in the park at this time of day. As soon as they received the location information, the people from San Colombo didn't care whether it was real or not. They immediately sent people to meet them. However, when their flying cars stopped at the place Silen had mentioned, they only saw a young man lying on a bench under a tree, reading a book. At first glance, they dismissed Silen as a student of San Colombo. But when they looked around, there were only a few people there, and there was no one there. Whoosh! A flying car landed there, and the principal of San Colombo hurried over from his flying car. Seeing that the people who had arrived earlier were still in a daze, he asked angrily, "Where are they?" Normally speaking, the headmaster didn't need to be in such a hurry to receive visitors. He himself had a noble background, and his influence in the 23rd Star region wasn't bad either. However, it was Guan Feng from the Royal Academy of Sciences who was on shift duty this time, and apparently, Guan Feng had sent his favorite student instead. Guan Feng's reputation was growing day by day in the academic circle. Most academics had heard of him even if they weren't in their own field, not to mention the fact that he was an imperial tutor. The headmaster didn't dare act carelessly. If he offended Guan Feng's favorite student, Guan Feng only needed to say a few bad things about him in the academic circle, and he wouldn't be able to keep his position for long. There were plenty of people fighting for the position. Everyone was still at a loss when they heard the headmaster's question. "I don't see anyone around here who looks like they belong to the RAS." In the past, the people from the RAS were escorted by their own personal guards, and most of them carried a sense of superiority that they couldn't hide. But when they looked around carefully, they realized that there was no one who fit the image they had in mind. Moreover, the people they had sent to greet this time were either experienced or had borrowed experience from others. They specifically picked middle-aged, weak-looking people with guards and a conceited aura. Unfortunately, they couldn't find anything. Just as the San Colombo headmaster was growing anxious, he saw a young man reading on a wooden chair close his book and walk over to him. The headmaster squeezed out a smile and made himself look friendly. "Excuse me, did you see anyone around here just now?" Instead of answering the headmaster's question directly, Silen said, "May I ask if you're Headmaster Flick?" "I am." There were a lot of people in San Colombo who knew Flick, so Flick didn't suspect Silen at all. After confirming the headmaster's identity, Silen took out a document and said, "I'm the one who came here this time. I believe my tutor has already contacted you." Flick's smile froze on his face. He took the document from Silen's hand and looked at it blankly. Then he looked at Silen, looked at the document again, looked at Silen again, and then looked again. It wasn't that Flick was being overly stubborn, but this was the first time he had seen someone like Scylla ever since he stepped foot into the world of education. Speaking of which, Scylla looked about the same as most of the students in their school, and he didn't feel the arrogant aura of the people from the RAS. Most importantly of all, Scylla was young. Not everyone could look like a young man at his age like that old monster Guan Feng. The young man before him was only in his 20s, and he hadn't even graduated from AF1 yet. "You're Scylla, the honorary scholar Guan Feng sent here to give a lecture?" Flick asked carefully. "I am." Flick wasn't the only one who was stunned. Everyone else who had come to greet him looked sluggish as well. It was infuriating to compare oneself to another. Although he was still skeptical, there would be a video conference before the lecture. Both the school and the RAS representatives would be present, so there was no way he could fake it. Flick politely invited Scylla to the conference venue despite his skepticism. There were still a lot of things to discuss, so the sooner he confirmed it, the sooner he could be at ease. Some people in the park saw a couple of flying cars belonging to the higher-ups of the school flying over and over again. They didn't know what they were doing, but it felt like they were in a hurry. Did a fight break out between nobles again? Many people hurriedly packed up their things and left the place. They didn't want to get involved in a fight between nobles. Anyone who got involved was bound to suffer. Flick led Scylla to the meeting room of San Colombo's higher-ups. When he arrived, a couple of retired vice principals and a few old men who were still influential in the 23rd Star Region's academic circle were already present. Sun Fu had been studying the golden thread tortoise with his old friends at home. He had ignored the higher-ups' attempts to communicate with him, but the higher-ups had stopped him at his doorstep and brought him here. He was still sulking. But when he saw Scylla carefully escorted by Flick, his jaw nearly dropped to the ground. Flick introduced Scylla to everyone, and as expected, the room was filled with a strange atmosphere. Everyone's gazes swept across Scylla like a scanner. After greeting them, Scylla took his seat and looked at Sun Fu, one of the retired elderly people diagonally across from him. Scylla nodded and greeted him with a smile. Sun Fu shivered. A chill ran down his spine. Is this guy really an honorary scholar of the RAS? No wonder he was lucky enough to catch a 100-year golden thread tortoise in the lake. Scylla would be depressed if he knew this. What does being an honorary scholar of the RAS have to do with being lucky enough to catch a golden thread tortoise? The video conference was held between San Colombo and Scylla on one side, and the RAS lecturer on the other. He had heard about it from the people in the institute before, so he wasn't surprised when Guan Feng sent Scylla over to give a talk. He greeted Guan Feng in the most natural way possible. The atmosphere in the room grew even weirder. However, Scylla's status as an honorary scholar was confirmed after this conference. Everyone sighed with emotion. They had always thought that San Colombo had produced a lot of geniuses, but Scylla's talent surprised them. Scylla was about the same age as their sons and grandsons, but he was already an honorary scholar of the RAS. After the conference was over, Sun Fu looked like he wanted to talk to Scylla but didn't know how to do it. He took a long time to prepare himself, but another dean of the School of Microbiology pushed him aside and beat him to it. Sun Fu was so angry that he slammed his walking stick on the ground a few times. Maybe the others didn't know that the dean of San Colombo's School of Microbiology had contacted the person who held the mysterious civilian summit after confirming Scylla's identity. Up until now, no one in the field of microbiology and viruses had come up with a better third-generation medicine than the zebra virus. Everyone said that the third-generation medicine was the perfect cure for the zebra virus. It wasn't easy to meet the person in person today, so how could he let this opportunity slip by? After chatting with a few people for a while, Scylla looked at Sun Fu, who was still sitting next to him. How's the golden thread tortoise going, old Mr. Sun? Scylla asked with a smile. It's going well. Sun Fu wanted to find a hole to hide in. Back then, because of the golden thread tortoise incident, his tone wasn't very good. He had even detained Scylla's golden thread tortoise. Originally, he planned to return it after the research was done and give Silen some compensation. He didn't expect the kid to hide it so well. Seeing that Silen wasn't as difficult to talk to as the people at the RAS, Sun Fu gradually relaxed. It didn't take long for him to talk to Silen about the golden thread tortoise. No one in the room wanted to hear the word suck up to, but in fact, everyone couldn't help but do it. It wasn't easy to meet a young man, so how could they let him go? However, it didn't take long before the old fellows realized that Celine was too cunning. He was playing Tai Chi with you. If you asked about academics, fine, you could talk about many fields. But if you asked about other things, I'm sorry, I can't answer. Although they didn't manage to get any useful information out of Silen, they had to admit that Silen was a very capable person. It was no wonder that he was able to get to the position everyone dreamed of at such a young age. Over the next few days, Silen stayed with the school officials at San Colombo. The date of the talk was getting closer and closer. A lot of people who were interested in Silen had come to San Colombo, and Flick had been on high alert lately. He was afraid that something bad would happen to Silen during this period of time. While paying attention to the school's internal affairs, he also contacted his family to investigate Silen. Although the information was still incomplete, Flick's face was like a chrysanthemum blossoming every time he saw Silen. It was a sight that gave everyone goosebumps. Still, everyone could guess why Flick treated Silen this way. On the day of the talk, San Colombo's largest academic hall was already overcrowded. Many people who didn't manage to get a ticket were loitering outside. They wanted to see what the people from the RAS looked like. An aircraft slowly approached. The design of the aircraft was rather formal, with San Colombo's school emblem on it. As soon as the aircraft appeared, the people waiting outside craned their necks. Since people weren't allowed to bring too many photographic equipment into the hall, the entrance inspection was very strict. This was something Flick had specifically instructed them to do. The aircraft flew over the crowd and stopped at the designated landing site. Not many people would be able to enter this place, so it was a pity that they couldn't see the people who were coming. The hatch of the aircraft opened, and a group of people walked out. Hey, which one is it? I don't know. I can't tell. Several patrolling officers at the landing site talked to each other. The lights in the academic hall changed, and the noisy hall suddenly fell silent. The door on the side of the podium opened, and a group of people walked in. They took their seats at the front of the hall. Their names were displayed on the seats. Everything was done according to the rules. The group of people attracted attention as soon as they entered the hall. Therefore, Silen, who was walking with a group of middle-aged and elderly people, was very conspicuous. Apart from the hostess, who wouldn't pay attention to someone who could walk with these influential figures in San Colombo? Hey, Little Four, why does that person look so familiar? Chang Little Four's classmate said, nudging him with his elbow. Chang Little Four stared in that direction without saying a word. Thomas, Hong Shi, and the others were also shocked. Was that a special guest? While a lot of people were guessing Silen's identity, Flick walked up to the stage and gave a formulaic speech. Then, the big screen behind him displayed the speaker's information, and Silen's image gradually popped up in the middle of the school's upper echelons. The image gradually grew bigger, and the introduction information appeared. Silen, an honorary scholar of the RAS. Currently studying at the first affiliated school of the RAS. His research results. The hall was silent. Chapter 308. Honorary Scholar. So this is the guy San Colombo is welcoming to. The RAS's main speaker this time. Are you kidding me? A deafening commotion broke out after the silence. The information on the big screen didn't show Silen's true age, but everyone knew that Silen was in his early 20s. The fact that he hadn't graduated from AF1 meant that he wasn't too old, and that he wasn't some old monster who pretended to be young. The fact that he was already an honorary scholar of the RAS at such a young age made many old pedants who had come from afar feel a little ashamed. The fact that he was accepted into AF1 was enough to make them grit their teeth in anger. The more information they saw on the screen, the more they wanted to grab the guy by the collar and ask him, "How the hell did you grow up?" Someone noticed that Silen's mentor column was Guan Feng and exclaimed in shock. No wonder he had achieved so much. He was Guan Feng's student. His research results weren't great, but every one of them was eye-catching. The most eye-catching of them all was the developer and project leader of the Zebra virus first, second, and third generation medicine. Before Silen joined the RAS, Guan Feng would sometimes assign him some tasks. Sometimes it was related to mechanical weapons, and sometimes it was related to other construction materials. Either way, it was enough to rank him in the RAS's annual ranking. It was just that Guan Feng had always thought of them as small frivolities, so he didn't take them to heart. He was only bringing them out now to make up for the occasion. In the eyes of Neo and the others, they were nothing more than small frivolities back in middle school. If everyone present knew what Guan Feng and Neo were thinking right now, would they vomit blood? Some of the students Silen ran into when he was walking around San Colombo a few days ago were feeling very excited right now. No one would have thought that someone like this would be sitting next to them. In particular, the group of students he met on the lake when he was fishing and the students who were discussing problems together in the bookstore were now pulling the people next to them to talk about what happened at that time, which made others very envious. It was an honor to be able to talk to someone like this. Chang Little Four watched the man calmly walk up the stage. Since when did Silen reach such a level without anyone noticing? Originally, he had thought that Silen was just a technician who knew a little about maintenance. Later on, he guessed that he might be a noble, and not just any noble at that. However, Chang Little Four had never imagined that Silen would have such results. Chang Little Four had heard his grandfather say that Silen was not a simple man, but now it seemed that it was not his background but his strength. It seemed that no one could see through Silen's true strength. Compared to the information displayed on the screen, his noble background was nothing more than a dim decoration. At least, that was what Chang Little Four thought. In the past, Chang Little Four would always think, what does a dream look like? Perhaps it was just like the person on the platform. There was no need for luxurious clothing or shiny noble emblems. The current Silen was like an unstoppable luminous object, so bright that no one dared to look at him directly. This person, who used to be quiet and unknown, had already shown his brilliance in this circle. Ha, this kid is really something. Zhu Ming and Tuosun were sitting in a corner. They weren't conspicuous, and Tuosun wasn't wearing a military uniform. What do you think they will think if they find out that Silen has a close relationship with the Zhen family and is half a member of the royal family, Tuosun? Zhu Ming asked with a smile. Tuosun didn't answer. Instead, he asked, do you know what the fact that Silen is Guan Feng's student means? Guan Feng has a very high reputation in the academic world. He can be said to be an authoritative figure. Zhu Ming's smile slowly disappeared as he spoke. He narrowed his eyes and looked a little serious. A while later, Zhu Ming uttered a word, Purgatory Thunder Snake. Very few people knew that the Purgatory Thunder Snake series was more than just a gun. Zhu Ming had once been able to get close enough to understand the Purgatory Thunder Snake, but he was eliminated later on. Seeing that Tuosun was smiling without saying anything, Zhu Ming knew that his guess was correct. He smiled again, but his eyes were a little more inquisitive. What model is that guy using? I heard it's. Tuosun drew a letter with his finger. Zhu Ming's pupils shrank in disbelief. The ones who were the most shocked of all were the people who were with Thomas that day. Although they weren't completely ignorant, the so-called lecture was just a show of face to prove that they weren't illiterate. Their identity and background meant that they didn't need to pay attention to most people at all. But now, they couldn't be more thankful that Thomas had stopped them that day. She felt very wronged when she saw everyone staring at her. She didn't know that Silen had such an identity. If she had, she would have taken the initiative to attack him. The discussion inside the academic hall didn't stop, and it was growing louder and louder. Sun Fu sat in his seat and spun his walking stick. The corner of his mouth couldn't help but curve upward. It looked like these people finally understood what he was feeling back then. Completely unaffected by the discussion inside the academic hall, Silen calmly walked up to the front of the stage with a smile on his face. People kept clapping and cheering as he walked up. There was a setting on the armrest of each seat. When someone touched it, they would clap. In addition to clapping, there were also several cheering options. In the past, when he was listening to a lecture in this academic hall, a drowsy person would divert some of his attention to pay attention to other people's movements. Whenever he heard the applause and cheers, he would choose to respond in kind. But now, Silen could see and hear that everyone was clapping with their hands instead of using that electronic voice to brush him off. Silen stood in front of the podium, looked around the hall, and bowed toward the venue. "Thank you for giving me your own applause." Following this bow, the voices below became even louder, and there was applause everywhere. Perhaps, most of the applause this time was given by some young admirers, but this was just the beginning, wasn't it? After a simple introduction, Silen began his lecture. The atmosphere of his lecture was divided into 3 categories. The first category was the content of his research, such as the synthesis and development of virus agents. The second category was related to some topics outside of the research content. The third category was interaction. The audience would ask questions, and Silen would answer them. The first category, when describing the development and clinical application of virus agents, also involved a lot of life problems. He talked about the reactions of people with different physiques to different viruses. He talked about some people who didn't survive the recent Zebra virus and were in a sub-health state. He talked about some rescue measures in the face of virus disasters that many people didn't know about. He didn't put on airs, he didn't use many unfamiliar words. He only used some simple words to express the content that needed to be said, so that everyone could better understand. There was no so-called speech script. Most of the time, Silen didn't even look at the projection displayed on the big screen behind him. While Silen was speaking, the light and shadow molecular model in his hands was enlarged on the big screen. Every group, every chemical bond and the related effects of the change in bond energy were explained in a simple and easy-to-understand way. Moreover, he interspersed some of his experience with the information so that everyone could better understand what he was talking about. The researchers in the relevant fields were skeptical at first, but gradually, they became deeply immersed in it. Some of them even hurriedly recorded the key points. Silen's explanation had given them a flash of inspiration in their minds. It was not to be underestimated or ignored. The discussion gradually died down, and everyone's attention began to enter a state of mind following Silen's explanation. They brought themselves into the story, into the planet that was filled with despair and darkness amidst the plague of the virus, into the world that was waiting for a savior. Everyone wanted to be a savior, but most of the time, people couldn't even take care of themselves. This had nothing to do with bravery or cowardice. Apart from the virus and medicine, Silen also talked about Guanfeng's famous research product, the Purgatory Thunder Snake. He mainly introduced the first 2 types of guns. At the same time, he also brought a piece of news to everyone. The Purgatory Thunder Snake would be added into the system of a couple of popular large-scale gunplay simulation games in the Empire. He also reminded everyone that not everyone could control the Purgatory Thunder Snake, so they had to be mentally prepared. There were no fewer people who loved guns than cars. Silen's words had undoubtedly made a lot of people itch in their hearts. Even Tuo Sen and Zhu Ming were starting to sharpen their knives. They couldn't miss the chance to see just how hard the legendary Purgatory Thunder Snake was to control. After the lecture was over, there was a short break. Since not many people had left to go to the washroom earlier, the washrooms were filled to the brim when it was time to rest. In fact, it was far more crowded than Flick had imagined. There was no helping it. In order to leave a better impression on Silen and the people who had come from afar, Flick had temporarily transferred a batch of portable washrooms over. During the break, some people went to the communication area to contact the people outside, but no one left the hall. After all, they couldn't come back in. The people outside could see the situation through the live broadcast, but they couldn't feel it as deeply as the people inside the hall. Hong Shi took out his communicator and contacted a few of his buddies who hadn't made it to the party this time. He told them about Silen. His idol was his idol after all. Not only was he a good driver, he was also a member of the RAS. The people who heard Hong Shi's words were so regretful that their teeth ached. Hong Shi had just finished showing off when he walked into the hall and saw Silen. He was about to run over and ask for some flying experience when he suddenly came to a sudden halt. Hong Shi wouldn't have bothered if Silen was chatting with the leaders of the school, but he froze when he saw the man's face. Hong Shi didn't have the courage to provoke Nuhach Tosin. Your idol seems to have hidden himself deeper than you think. Thomas came over and said. Hong Shi shot Thomas a glance and ignored him. He continued to look for opportunities to strike up a conversation. He didn't know much about academic content, but he did learn a lot today. It was much better than what his rigid teachers taught him. Even if he couldn't put it to practical use, he could still use it to pick up girls. After the break, Silen began his lecture on the second category. It had nothing to do with research content. He talked about a lot of sensitive topics that no one dared to talk about normally. Before I came here, my mentor Guan Feng told me to speak loudly, don't hold back. That's why I'm standing here right now. Silen talked about the current state of the academic world. He didn't want to admit it, but it was true that the academic world was no longer pure anymore. He talked about the marginalization of academics, the dreams most academics had when they first chose this path, and the reality they were feeling now. When a noble's son can slap an old professor who has taught for decades in public without any scruples, more educators will wonder why they chose this path in the first place. Academia isn't an unreachable, unattainable freak formed by the accumulation of specialized words. It can exist everywhere. Nobles, non-nobles, academics, non-academics, smart, stupid, rich, poor, young, old, no matter who it is, there are no limits. Once, I was blocked by a couple of racing nobles and used as a target. Fortunately, my driving skills were slightly better than theirs, and I managed to shake them off. Later, I asked the princes of the royal family, and I asked, do you guys do this normally? They said, how is that possible? What's the point? It wasn't just about non-nobles. It was also about the upper-class nobles. Silen knew that there were some words that could only be said when one stood at a certain height. There were some things that could only be done when one reached a certain height before they would be more meaningful. Otherwise, the only thing that could be said was death, or a life worse than death. In the corner, Zhu Ming sighed emotionally, what a monstrous age. I'm afraid it won't be peaceful in the future. While Silen was speaking, some media outlets had already begun to report to their superiors because some of the things that Silen said were things that even they didn't dare to speak carelessly. Therefore, when the people outside the conference hall were watching the live broadcast with relish, there was an interruption of an advertisement. Fuck, there's an advertisement in the live broadcast. It's not time to rest now. Hey, what's going on? What's wrong with the media? I don't know, is it the same outside the conference hall? It seems that other than the people inside the conference hall, even the venue outside the academic hall can't be watched. Many people began to complain to the media, but they found that there was only a sweet, unhurried human service voice that kept repeating. Many people were so angry that they directly smashed their communicators. Some people went to inquire as nobles, but they were blocked. Gradually, everyone found that things didn't seem to be so simple. The academic hall had been cut off from the outside world, but deafening applause resounded again and again. The civil summit regarding the zebra virus had brought the empire to a climax, and today, a historic lecture had been held in the largest academic hall in San Colombo. Perhaps after the lecture, people would forget about Silen and the lecture for a few years, a few decades, or even longer. However, every detail of the lecture had been recorded in the Hall of Fame. It was so that everyone who came to listen to the lecture would know that a lecture had taken place here. The applause didn't stop. The second category didn't last too long, but he mentioned a lot of people, including the seemingly mischievous but stubborn Naimi. It was just that Silen didn't mention any of them by name. Those who were familiar with Silen might be able to match their names with each other, but the main point was that this speech had given both nobles and non-nobles a clearer understanding. After the second category was over, Silen turned down Flick's offer of a break and went straight to the third category, interactive questions. There were a lot of questions. In fact, the questioners almost started arguing with each other. Silen would give a certain amount of explanation to everyone's questions. However, when it came to personal secrets, questions like, "What proof do you have?" and especially questions like, life choices, Silen would not answer them directly. That was their own life. If they themselves did not understand it, then why would Silen mention it? Moreover, now was not the time to mention these things. Perhaps, they would understand it soon. Rumor had it that a lot of people refused to end the lecture when the allotted time was up. Hongxi tried to squeeze his way to talk to Silen, but he was shoved away. Once the allotted time was up, Silen left without saying anything. Silen thought that no one here could stop him if he wanted to leave. Flick turned around and discovered that Silen was gone. He and Hui Mao slipped out of the hall. When no one was looking, a spaceplane flew over and left again. "You've offended a lot of people this time, I think." Hui Mao wagged his tail. "So what?" Coach Guan said that there's no need to worry. Plus, they can't do anything to us no matter how angry they are. Silen didn't mind it at all. Some of the words were relayed to Guan Feng, and Silen agreed with Guan Feng's point of view. That was why he was afraid that he would offend a lot of people if he said it out loud, especially some nobles and local management. Silen's communicator rang while they were talking. Silen smiled and accepted the call after reading the message. "You've offended a lot of people today, Silen." Tuo Sen's image appeared on the screen. However, he didn't look worried at all. In fact, he looked a bit expectant. "I know. But there are too many parasites here. It's time to clean them up." "That's none of my business." "Really? I'm afraid you can't stay out of it whether you do or not. I've received some news that your return may not be smooth." Tuo Sen gloated. Got it." Tuo Sen looked curiously at Silen. Seeing that Silen didn't look worried at all, he asked, "Aren't you going to apply for protection from the 23rd MR? "No need. You sure are conceited. This is called confidence. Suit yourself." A pause later, Tuo Sen saw that Silen looked calm and unworried. This made him even more curious. "Aren't you going to visit your old friends?" "Yeah, but I need to take care of some small problems first. Otherwise, I'll be annoyed to death." Tuo Sen had an odd look on his face. "I really don't know what you're thinking." "Thank you for your kindness." "Thanks my ass. Go on and be careful, those guys are very sneaky." "It's fine. They won't let them go back." After ending the call, Tuo Sen fell into deep thought. He just couldn't figure out who was behind Silen. Guan Feng couldn't do it alone. The Zhen family? The Zhen family wouldn't be directly involved in this. Plus, they didn't have much influence in the 23rd star region. Distant water couldn't put out a nearby fire. What on earth was Silen thinking? Suddenly, Tuo Sen's heart skipped a beat. Cold sweat appeared on his forehead. Could it be that the royal family allowed this? If that was the case, then a lot of people were going to suffer this time. After thinking for a while, Tuo Sen contacted a few people. Tell them to behave themselves and not take on any missions. Think of it as a holiday. Anyone who disobeys can get lost. I'm Tuo Senator, tell them to watch out for someone. It wasn't just Tuo Senator, although the Thomas family's interests were also affected. Thomas contacted them in time and suppressed them. Some people were watching from the sidelines, some were hesitating, some were planning, and some were already taking action. The battle had begun in a place where most people weren't paying attention. Not long after, the nobles who had sent out the first batch of people didn't return at all. Their disappearance was very strange. Then, some nobles received news that almost all the people they had sent out had been wiped out. More importantly, the 23rd MR's army didn't move at all. How was this possible? How could a mere honorary scholar of the Royal Academy of Sciences do something like this when the military wasn't around? What kind of person was Silen? What kind of background did he have? What gave him the courage to do something like this? Therefore, some people began to think deeply, and some gave up. Wasn't it just a short-term interest? Let's avoid this incident first and continue after the storm has died down. Some people contacted a few famous nobles in the capital, but they didn't receive any definite information. Or rather, most of the nobles there hadn't even paid attention to the matter before this. Zhen Xingming and the other two were having fun in the bar. Hee hee, that guy sure is bold. I can't believe he said something like that. What's there to be afraid of? If I knew better, I would have said the same thing. A worm should be pulled out as soon as possible. Tisk, why don't you think about how many people are involved in this? But how did he take care of it? Curious, very curious. Did you get in touch with him, Xingming? Belle asked. No. He disappeared mysteriously after his speech, but I'm sure nothing happened to him. My family wouldn't be this quiet otherwise. That's true. Oftentimes, people who looked stubborn on the outside actually understood certain things better than anyone else. Inside the palace. The emperor looked at the information in his hand and smiled. He said to the guard captain beside him, "Let him be. He knows what he's doing. You don't have to interfere." The emperor didn't refuse Silen's request to remove some people. Will things go a lot smoother if we remove these people? Of course. Some trends have to be curbed by force. Unfortunately, I don't have the ability to do so, but Silen can. Guan Feng's face was on the screen in front of the emperor. That's fine. That kid is truly in charge now. But I want to see results when the time comes. While everyone was secretly paying attention to Silen and Hui Mao had arrived at Old Chang's planet. It was a very remote place, and not many people knew what Silen had done. In fact, Silen's speech was only known to a small group of people. Moreover, the speech had been cut off halfway, so no one dared to spread it outside of the academic conference hall. That was why there were even fewer people who knew about Silen. It was still the same planet, and it was still the same region. Not much had changed. Silen arrived at Old Chang's shop along the familiar route after the spaceplane landed. The shop's business was pretty good. Even from afar, Silen could hear the three brats talking as if they were asking for credit, and Old Chang's laughter. Judging from their voices, they seemed to be in good health. The employee Silen had hired before he left, was still there. He was greeting customers. Didn't recognize Silen at first. He wasn't familiar with Silen after all. Two service robots were passing parts to him. Walked over and said, "Welcome. What can I do for you?" However, before Lai could continue to ask, the three little kids behind him rushed over with eagerness. "Big brother Silen. Big brother Silen, why are you here?" "Grandpa, Big brother Silen is back." Chang Xiaoba shouted into the shop. Chang Xiaowu was already studying outside. Only the three little kids were often at home. However, from the looks of it, they kept in touch often and didn't seem too sad. Hearing Chang Xiaoba's shout, old Chang couldn't care less about repairing the flying car. He quickly ran out. Old Chang's son was quite healthy. His living conditions were good, and his body was much better. The three little kids had grown a lot taller. Although Silen had brought some toys, they still liked to play claw stacking with Hui Mao. After visiting old Chang and his family for a night, Silen bid them farewell and left. Before leaving the planet, Silen went to the civilian area. The layout hadn't changed much. It was still the same, spider web. However, the area around the garbage dump had expanded. Compared to the slow development of the city, the civilian area was retreating, repeating their simple lives day after day. Some people were extremely satisfied, while others were full of resentment. Without staying for too long, Silen left the planet. He wasn't worried that those people would attack old Chang's family. There were people in the dark, protecting them. Silen, where are we going now? Are we going back? Hui Mao asked. I'm afraid not. We'll meet the robbers. Hui Mao's eyes lit up. He immediately replied, then we won't go back. Where are the robbers? We'll meet them soon. It was indeed soon. When Silen was eating Chinese food in a restaurant on a planet, he found poison in the food. However, Silen ate it as if he didn't know it. Hui Mao didn't mind. This kind of poison was nothing to them. After leisurely eating Chinese food, Silen left the restaurant with Hui Mao. They walked to a deserted place, and the 3 robots appeared. Are they all taken care of? Yes. That's good. Send a message to their master. Tell him that I'll be looking for him soon. Yes. The 3 robots disappeared again, as if they had never appeared. When they were flying away from the planet, a small fleet intercepted them. There were no insignias on the fleet's starships and aircraft. There was nothing special about them, but they were fully armed. Chapter 309. The other party had no intention of negotiating and opened fire as soon as they arrived. However, before they could open fire, Silen's spaceplane turned invisible. Then, it was as if it had disappeared. They could not see or scan it. The cannons fired in all directions, hoping to hit the hidden spaceplane, but in the end, they all shot into the distance, toward the debris in space. After a series of random shots, the first huge explosion appeared in the fleet, followed by a second and a third. No one in the fleet knew why this happened. It was inexplicably frightening. When all the starships and spaceplanes in the fleet exploded, everything calmed down. Silen's spaceplane reappeared in the distance, and in a few other places, robots appeared one after another, followed by a small starship. The robots completed their mission and reported to Silen before flying back to the starship to complete their next mission. Similar things happened many times, but Silen was already used to it. Not long after the robots left, Silen received a call from Shikai. Silen, what are you planning to do? Silen did not answer. Instead, he asked, have you thought about what happened last time? Shikai paused. Give me some more time. Sure. Silen did not mind Shikai dragging it out for so long. He had his own plans. Do you still need robots? No, these are enough for now, Shikai sighed. There are people in Black Viper who are not satisfied with what you are doing. Although their opposition will not have much effect, I hope you can think more before you act. Silen smiled. Are you warning me? I don't have the guts. You are now one of the 3 leaders. If you think it's right, then do it. If you need more robots, contact me directly. Okay. After talking for a while, Silen ended the call and sat in his chair to think. Hui Mao, who was resting on a shelf next to him, looked up at Silen and said, that guy really took a long time to think. It's fine. We have other things to do anyway. Since he had to think of a way to return to the League of Stars, Silen would not place all his hopes on Shikai. Looking at the name list in his hand, those restless people should be quiet now. The next step was about to begin. Silen had a talk with Guan Feng before his lecture at San Colombo. Aside from deciding on the content of his lecture, Silen also proposed a plan to create an online forum for academic exchange. There were a lot of online forums in the Empire, and of course there were many academic ones as well. However, the online forum Silen had created was different. There weren't too many restrictions, and there wasn't any difference in status. As long as you understood a certain field, you could speak freely in the forum. It didn't matter if you were a senior professor or a nameless nobody in real life, you could speak freely. Moreover, the identity information of the people in the forum was confidential. Outsiders would not know. This was a kind of protection policy. The plan was approved very quickly. At first, the decision-makers at the RAS didn't care about the forum at all. It was only because Guan Feng had spoken up that they quickly approved it. After all, Silen was a member of the RAS, and this kind of thing had to be approved by the RAS. Otherwise, it would be considered a violation of the RAS's regulations. Aside from the RAS's approval, Silen also received permission from the Mist Bodhisattva Emperor. Therefore, there were two symbols of authority and approval on the login screen of the online forum. One was the RAS's, and the other was the Mist Bodhisattva Emperor's. Right now, the academic community of the empire needed a source of motivation and cohesion. They weren't people like Neo, who were easily influenced by the outside world and limited by life. They didn't have a second Black Viper to protect them. Silen's forum had provided them with a platform, and Black Viper was able to show off their existence as well. Silen was still working on the forum. He and Hui Mao were the main body, while Shikai and other Black Viper-related personnel were assisting them. During this time, Silen had delegated the task of dealing with the assassins and interceptors to the robots and special forces. With their covert operations, none of the troublemakers were able to escape unscathed. Tuosan thought that Silen was a knife in the imperial family's hand. Since the imperial family couldn't do it themselves, they left it to Silen to clean up the academic community. What he didn't know was that Silen himself was borrowing the name and influence of the imperial family and the RAS to achieve his own goals. Hui Mao was the only one who understood this. Otherwise, he wouldn't have done everything he could to help Silen create this online forum. Moreover, the name Hubie Lu would soon be known on this forum. Not long after, just when everyone in the 23rd star region thought that Silen would stop causing trouble, Silen reappeared and created a new forum, Return. The logo of the two badges on the forum shocked a lot of people. There were many forums in the empire, and any one of these two badges was enough to raise eyebrows. But this forum had both of them at the same time. It was only natural that a forum recognized by both the imperial family and the RAS would become popular. Even people outside the academic community wanted to take a look. There were many types of forums, and they all started with questions and bounties. If the questioner was satisfied with the answer, the bounty would be transferred to the person who answered. The bounty wasn't virtual. It could be converted into real Mist Bodhisattva dollars, and the money would be transferred to a memory card. Everything was driven by the word profit, and Silen had put a lot of effort into the forum. At the beginning, the bounty for the questions was 300 million. This included Silen's own money, Yufeng's, the RAS's startup funds, and the Mist Bodhisattva Emperor's financial support. A portion of the initial registrants were only here to take a look because of Silen, a portion of them were attracted by the two badges, and the rest of them were here for the bounty money. Some people used their virtual IDs, and some used their real names. This was especially true for famous people. They disdained using virtual IDs and were used to doing things with their real names. That was why everyone knew that on the first day the forum was opened, a guy called Hubie Lu in the mechanical engineering and programming section of the Return forum had angered a famous old scholar to the point of fainting. I heard that the old scholar had to rest in the hospital for a month after that. It was obvious how angry he was. But after the old scholar had regained his energy, he came back and quarreled with Hubie Lu again. After that, the name Hubie Lu gradually became known to the public. It was because he could find useful answers to many obscure and difficult questions in the mechanical engineering section. But when people asked him about his true identity, he refused to answer. Therefore, many people thought that this mysterious Hubie Lu was a folk expert. There were many hidden experts like this. Some were attracted by the bounty, and some were remembered by people when they argued with famous scholars. But they seemed to only exist in this virtual network. It was impossible to know their roles in the real world. Since the first day, the debate in the forum had never stopped. There was a special arena set up in the forum. It wasn't a competition of physical strength, but a disguised debate field. Heated topics would be debated here, and people who supported different viewpoints would choose representatives and start the debate. Some teachers of advanced education schools even forgot to go to class because they wanted to watch a gladiatorial match online. Some academic or educational institutions had begun to think carefully. When the arena debated, the arguments cited by the arena would emphasize the research results of a certain person in a certain research institution or school. This was also a good advertising platform to let people know more about those institutions that were not famous. Here, people saw a lot of new ideas and learned a lot. People who wanted money would spend more time and effort to find answers. Even if everyone's starting point was different, they were all working hard for the same problem. They weren't afraid of arguments. They were afraid that people wouldn't argue. It wasn't a bad thing to let more people experience this kind of atmosphere. A lot of people who stood at the top of the academic world didn't lack money at all. It was why the bounty they posted could make a poor family rich overnight. Wasn't this also a driving factor? In fact, there were some powerful scholars who had fallen on hard times for some reason and became rich overnight because they answered the questions. The Sizer family made up the majority of the people who answered questions related to flying cars. They would add the words Sizer Whirlwind in front of their virtual ID, and Fleeka had chosen them to be stationed in the forum to answer some people's questions. At the same time, the Sizer family's influence grew even more. Naimi even joined in the fun. He used his real name and discussed the topic of flying cars with a lot of flying car enthusiasts. Gradually, everyone realized that the noble young master of the Sizer family wasn't just for show. He was very knowledgeable in the field of flying cars, and although he wasn't completely knowledgeable, it was enough to change a lot of people's impressions of him. "You've caused a storm, Silin," Guan Feng said on the communicator screen, but this is exactly what His Majesty wants to see. Up until now, the debate on this free forum had overturned 3 previously recognized theories, and there were a few more that were still being debated. The academic world was in an uproar right now. Silin shot a glance at Hui Mao, who was squatting next to the microcomputer and wrestling with someone on the forum. He smiled but didn't answer. Hui Mao had been very cocky lately because he had angered a couple of famous professors to the point of fainting. Of course, a lot of famous people had come to him for advice, including the ones who had been infuriated to the point of lying on the ground a couple of times. But every time they were pissed off by Hui Mao, they would come back to him again. It was a kind of acknowledgement, but they were too embarrassed to say it out loud. The name Hubie Liu was known to the public on this virtual platform. It was a place where he could show off all his talents other than being an idiot and a glutton to his heart's content. He lived in this virtual world without any scruples. Besides Hui Mao, some people from Black Viper had also come into contact with this forum. But before that, Silin told them that there were some things they couldn't expose. The 3 publicly recognized theories were overturned in a wrestling match between Neo and a couple of honorary scholars and an academician of the RAS. That was why the dean of the RAS looked terrible as of late. He looked like he wanted nothing more than to drag Silin over and give him a good scolding. Silin himself had benefited a lot from other people's knowledge as well. He had a name list in his hands while absorbing the thoughts and knowledge of all parties. If there were no surprises, some of the people on this name list would be able to help him open a path to return. Chapter 310. This time, Shikai didn't waste too much time thinking. Not long after Silin's return forum was created, Shikai contacted Silin. The meeting place was the disappeared area of Black Viper, but it was a little far from the center. There was an asteroid filled with electronic devices and mechanical structures, and this asteroid was Shikai's, or rather, the Shi family's base of operations. When they approached the asteroid, Silin sensed a strong mechanical signal. It gave Silin a very strange feeling. It was similar to Sigma's, but it was also very different. There's a very large artificial intelligence control center here that controls almost the entire planet. We's also stopped arguing in the forums. This planet gave Whis a very special feeling, and it even carried a sense of friendliness and intimacy. In other words, the artificial intelligence knew who was coming here, and it was showing emotions. Yes, emotions. Unlike the rigid emotions of other robots, this kind of emotion was more like the expression of a human, just like what Shikai said was the standard of the original. Most of the electronic planet was made up of machines, and only a small number of humans were related to the Shi family. "Welcome, my dear friends," a voice said. The voice was transmitted through the communication system on the spaceplane Silen was piloting. It was very gentle, like a kind old man speaking with a smile. "Who are you?" Hui Mao asked. "My name is Chip. I heard from Shikai that you know Sigma." "Oh. You know Sigma too?" Hui Mao curled his tail and looked around. He didn't see any robots that looked like Sigma, but the owner of the voice reminded Hui Mao of Sigma. "We're old friends. Sigma and I are brothers. Are you one of the 5 original robots?" Silen asked. "Yes." Following the instructions displayed on the screen, the spaceplane flew to a fortress surrounded by mechanical devices. This fortress was like the center of a spider web, and the other machines were distributed around it. After entering the fortress, Silen saw Shikai waiting for him with 2 other people he didn't recognize. They were probably from the Shi family. Apart from these few people, the others were all robots that looked similar to humans. Since Shikai was able to invite Silen here, it showed his sincerity. Even the upper echelons of Black Viper rarely visited this electronic planet. "Where's Chip?" Hui Mao looked around and asked impatiently. Shikai smiled. "Follow me." Shikai signaled the others not to follow him, and then led Silen and Hui Mao to a spacious area inside the fortress. Along the way, Silen found that there were many access controls, but there was no need to swipe a card or verify identity. The door would open automatically. Just as Hui Mao had said, this place was controlled by an AI hub. When they arrived at the venue, the door opened automatically. Silen followed Shikai inside, and the first thing that entered his eyes was a gigantic mechanical body. Complicated circuit boards and connecting wires were scattered all over the place, and there was a flashing circular screen at the top of the machine. As Silen and the others approached, the screen moved down until it was level with Silen's line of sight. A human face appeared on the screen. It was the face of an old man. "Nice to meet you. You're Chip." Hui Mao, who was crouching on Silen's shoulder, stood up and looked at the face on the screen. "Why doesn't Sigma have a face?" "It does." The screen showed Sigma's signature blue face. "That's it." "Then why do you look like this?" Hui Mao pointed a claw at the old face. "It doesn't look right." Shikai smiled wryly. Not only did it look wrong, but it couldn't be helped. If it weren't for the remedial measures he took later, even Chip would be gone. This time, Shikai didn't say too much. Chip was the one who explained everything to Silen. He explained the origin of the 5 robots and what happened after that. Just as Silen thought, the ancestors of the Shi family accidentally discovered a substance that could be used as a brain compound for the robots. That was how they created the 5 original robots. Some things happened after that. When they first arrived, they ran into the rebellion of the Empire. Most of the people and robots were killed, and only a few survived. They ran into Mist Bodhisattva Freeman, who was ostracized at the time. Freeman provided them with shelter, and at the same time, they developed a batch of intelligent combat robots together. After that, the remaining members of the Shi family and the 4 original robots signed an agreement with the Mist Bodhisattva Emperor. After that, an organization called Black Viper appeared in the Empire. This was the same thing every patriarch of the Shi family knew. Shikai knew this as well. However, there was one thing he didn't know: there were only 4 robots when they met Freeman. As for why, no one knew the answer even now. There were many things that were still a mystery. Silen also noticed this problem. Why were there only 4 original robots when we met His Highness Freeman? Chip paused for a moment before sighing. Later on, our master erased a part of our memories. We don't know what that memory was. The only thing I remember is that our master said it was to protect the She family. The robot that disappeared it was Sigma, Chip answered. Sillin looked down. If it was Sigma, then the erased memory was probably about how Sigma was sent to the League of Stars. Moreover, the She family had concealed the technology they knew about the technology that allowed them to travel between two major star systems. So, where did you meet Sigma? Perhaps these are the memories that were erased, Chip asked anxiously. It had been wondering about this for almost 1,000 years. When Shikai finally told it about Sigma, it made him agree to Sillin's request immediately. Originally, Sillin had come here to lay his cards on the table, but he didn't know that the She family didn't belong to the Mist Bodhisattva Empire at all. Or rather, they knew about it in the first place, but their memories were erased later on. Seeing Sillin's hesitation, Chip added, not all of the original robots had their memories erased. I don't know if Sigma's memories were erased or not, but I'm sure Moon didn't. Of the 5 of us, Sigma is the most innocent, and Moon is the best at playing dumb. I didn't find out until later that Moon's memories weren't erased like the rest of us. Moon wasn't one of the 2 destroyed original robots, but he had been in a special state since a long time ago. In order to understand the complex substance in the brain, the She family's descendants had destroyed 2 original robots, and Chip had almost been crippled as well. He wouldn't have ended up like this if he hadn't made amends later on. After Chip's accident, Moon went into forced hibernation. No one could wake him up, and Chip forbade the She family's descendants from using him for research. Even if he couldn't create another original robot, he wouldn't allow them to destroy him. Before Moon went into forced hibernation, he had chatted with Chip for a while. It was then that Chip realized that Moon knew a lot more than they did. It was because he knew how to play dumb that he was able to keep more secrets, which was why his master was willing to share them with him. Not even the She family could force Moon to be used for research. Many people had tried to wake him up, but to no avail, including Chip himself. It was as if Moon had sealed himself away from the outside world and refused to communicate with the outside world. Where is Moon? Sillin asked. Moon has been in forced hibernation for more than 700 years. A light screen appeared in front of them after Chip's voice was heard. It was a robot that looked similar to Sigma, but it was lying quietly on the ground without any reaction. Sillin was wondering if he should try to wake Moon up. Maybe he could learn the secret technology from Moon, but Shikai interrupted his train of thought. What Shikai cared about the most wasn't what Sigma did all those years ago, but how to create the original robots. Moreover, he didn't think that Sillin could wake Moon up. Sillin, do you think it's possible to recreate the original robots? Shikai asked. Sillin frowned as he stared at Chip's huge body. I want to know what the complex substance in the brain is. Shikai shook his head. Like I said, we haven't been able to figure it out for nearly 1,000 years. Even the 2.5 original robots that we sacrificed only know part of it. Shikai nodded at Chip, and an image appeared on the screen. It was a spherical crystal, but it was not a solid sphere. It had a core, and there were countless branches extending from this core. Each branch was strangely shaped, and they were very complicated thin crystal columns. These thin crystal columns seemed to be covering the core with a thick layer of fluff. Sillin's face twitched when he saw the image. Hui Mao also shook his beard. Shikai was shocked when he noticed Sillin and Hui Mao's strange reactions. Have you seen this before, Sillin? Sillin was distressed. How should he put it? Why is it here? I've seen it before, but it's been used up. I'm afraid it'll be difficult to find it again. It's used up. Shikai felt his boiling blood turn cold. He then asked, was it used on robots? Where are they now? Sillin shook his head and said nothing. Hui Mao was staring at Shikai with hostility. He had already destroyed 2.5 original robots, and now he was plotting against Cheto. Right now, Sillin was worried that Shikai was right. If Shikai's words were true, then Cheto's mind might stretch even further than he expected. He had left the League of Stars for such a long time. Would Cheto's development go astray? If he did, then it was very likely that he would create a robot storm. Shikai was about to ask more questions, but Chip stopped him. Shikai might not be able to sense Huemao's hostility clearly, but Chip did. Therefore, he changed the topic. You can try to awaken you if you want to know more. If you can't, there's not much we can do to help. Sillin nodded. Let's give it a try. We can only start with it. Chip opened a door, and inside was Moon, who had been forced to hibernate. At first glance, he looked similar to Sigma, but the color was a little different. Other than that, there wasn't much difference. Unlike humans, who could still feel the aura of life when they were in hibernation, this kind of robot was like an antique that had been hidden from the world for a long time, quietly staying there without any signs of life. I brought 2 friends with me. They said they've seen Sigma before. Chip's voice was full of emotion. Several hundred years had passed, and Chip was now the only one of the 5 brothers who was still guarding this place. The other 4 were either destroyed, missing, or in hibernation. Even though they were not real humans, their thoughts and emotions were similar to those of humans. They would still feel sad and nostalgic, but as time passed, they would also feel helpless. Moon didn't react to Chip's words, just like before. Shikai watched from the side. He still didn't hold out much hope. If it was possible, the Shi family would have awakened it a long time ago. There was no need to wait until now. It was as if Yu was refusing to awaken or anyone. Shikai had always wondered if the ancestors of the original robots had scared him off when they experimented on them. That was why he had sealed himself away. Are robots that emotionally fragile? Sillin didn't say anything. He flicked Huemao's ear and nodded at Yu with his chin. Huimao jumped off Sillin's shoulder and circled around Yu once. Then, it ran up to Yu's head and patted it with its paw. It was a soundless conversation. They were communicating in machine language, just like the one Huimao used to communicate with Sigma. Although it was soundless, Shikai could sense some of it. He couldn't understand it completely. Chip's eyes grew brighter and brighter, and every now and then, a complicated emotion flashed across his face. Huimao was talking to Yu in a special machine language. It was all about Sigma, but it didn't mention that they were from the League of Stars. Chip could understand it, so he couldn't say too much for now. As Huimao spoke, Chip sensed that Yu was sending him a weak feedback. However, it was all for Huimao, so he didn't know what Yu was sending him. After the weak feedback, the machine's signal grew stronger. Even Shikai could sense that the robot was slowly coming back to life. When the blue light flashed, Sillin knew that Huimao had succeeded. Sure enough, whether it was a human or a robot, they needed to be moved by emotions and reason. Otherwise, it would continue to play dumb and act like it didn't know anything. The blue light grew stronger and stronger. After a few changes, Yu suddenly jumped a few meters away. Then, a childish voice filled with confusion and fear rang out, Who are you? On the round screen, Chip's old face stiffened. Yu was playing dumb again. Chapter 311. The blue stripes on Moon's face flickered as if he was examining the person in front of him. Finally, he looked at Chip and circled around him. Hey, Chip, why are you still like this? Chip didn't answer. He believed that Moon knew all this time. He was just pretending not to know anything. Even in a dormant state, Moon was capable of sensing everything around him. Huimao jumped onto Moon's head just like he did with Sigma. Moon didn't say anything and flew around Chip with Huimao in tow. Shikai was very excited. Moon's awakening meant that he could learn some of the family's secrets. Moon, I'm Shikai, the current head of the family and the person in charge, Shikai said as he walked up to Moon. But after a momentary pause, Yu replied with an, oh, and went back to chatting with Wheeze. He completely ignored Shikai. Seeing Moon and Huimao chatting and laughing, Shikai felt very awkward. He didn't know how to communicate with this original robot. Moon was different from Chip. Chip gave off the impression that he was a steady man, and he treated the Shi family members like they were his juniors. Moon, on the other hand, was different. From his reaction just now, Shikai knew that this original robot wasn't going to be easy to deal with. It could keep secrets for 1,000 years, and it could continue to do so. The hard part was how to get it to talk. Silen was going to talk to Moon, but after what happened to Shikai, Silen didn't say anything. Instead, he used machine language to test Moon's reaction. Moon, who was chatting with Huimao, suddenly froze. He looked at Silen and said in a joking tone, "Did you come from that side?" "That side?" Shikai looked at Silen in confusion. Silen knew that Moon was referring to the League of Stars, so he nodded. "We met Sigma there. We came from there too." "Did they find all of Alilo's cages?" Moon flew up to Silen and asked. "Most of them were found before we arrived. I don't know the rest." Yu tilted his head and muttered, "It's been 1,000 years and you still haven't found everything. How slow. I've already said that there's no need to leave it for them. Wouldn't it be better to swallow it yourself?" Shikai didn't interrupt. He knew that Yu and Silen were talking about secrets that the Shi family didn't know about. "Did your master leave it there on purpose?" Silen asked. "Yeah. Back then, the Shi family was outnumbered and killed all those who had bad intentions. Some of the things left behind by those bad guys were left behind by Master. He said that people shouldn't be too greedy. Besides, those things didn't belong to the Shi family in the first place." "Why?" "The things he left behind are all very rare treasures. Because the people of the Shi clan like to create, not be given. Things given by others will make them dependent. Moreover, as long as the people of the Shi clan are around, they can continue to create those things. Your master is very confident." This was what Silen thinks. It wasn't because the people of the Shi family were kind enough to leave those things behind. Rather, it was because they had a kind of self-confidence that they had solved a problem that countless people in the League of Stars thought was impossible. At that time, the 5 of us were watching The Myth of Creation, and were arguing about the story. Then, Master told us the plan. This was a game that we thought of together with Master. The 5 Olilos in The Myth of Creation represented different dreams: White Knight, Tear of God, Shortcut, God's Back Garden, and the Spell. The corresponding 5 things were left there. At the time, Master said that if we had time, we would see who would find the 5 Olilo in the end. But what we didn't expect was that he never made it back. Moon flew over to Chip's gigantic body, sat down on a cable, and swung back and forth like he was on a swing. If it were anyone else, they wouldn't have the guts to do this, and Chip wouldn't treat them like they were. But now, on the round screen, Chip's eyes were filled with nostalgia. Everything Moon did was spoil him like he was his younger brother. While swinging, Moon continued, "When we first arrived, the 5 of us always got together to bicker and argue, and Sigma was always the one who got bullied. One time, Sigma lost a bet, and Zoel told Sigma to go and see if anyone had found a shortcut, and that it could only come back to us if it found one. At the time, we were just joking. We really just wanted to tease it. Master also knew that the reason Sigma always lost was because the 4 of us teamed up to trick it. That guy was easy to trick and bully. After the 4 of us egged him on, the Master agreed to let Sigma go. He also promised to bring Sigma back from time to time for a reunion. Sigma hugged Master's arm and said that it was scared to go alone, so Master created Love Egg to accompany Sigma. Moon fell silent for a very long time. Chip didn't say anything either, and he looked very sad. Silen knew that they didn't pick up Sigma because Sigma thought that it was because the shortcut wasn't activated. In fact, it didn't even consider the possibility that it was the other 4 who were toying with it. Later on, a war broke out. A lot of people died in it, and a lot of equipment, records, and talents were lost to the flames of war that spread across almost half of the mist Bodhisattva Empire. Master and a few others were lucky enough to escape the war zone, run into the Freeman, and seek shelter. However, we weren't able to bring Sigma back because the black box that opened the spatial link was lost in the chaos of that war. It was lost in the vast universe. We tried to make another one, but the loss of the records and talents made the mission even more difficult. We couldn't contact Sigma, and we couldn't make another one until Master passed away. Before he passed away, Master said that he felt the most sorry for Sigma. It was because he lied, but he didn't have the time to fix it. The four of us felt very guilty because we were the ones who created that lie, and the price we had to pay was that there was no second Sigma for us to bully. Master said that we were humans, but we had the bodies of robots, so we shouldn't think that we were different. We should get along with everyone else. But when our companions left us one after another, we really did become different. Master, Sigma, and some of the Shi family's acquaintances left one after another. In the end, we watched as the familiar faces disappeared, and the cycle continued. When the Shi family said that they wanted to research the original robot, Zoel was the first to volunteer. It was because Zoel felt very guilty and regretful that it was the cause of everything that happened to Sigma. Zoel didn't come back after that. Later, someone said that they wanted to continue researching the original robot, so Euryphia went over on her own. When Euryphia walked into the lab, she told us to take care. She never came out after that. You stared at Shikai. His blue bar was flashing, and even though his expression wasn't as clear as a human's, Shikai could sense Yu's resentment. That's not what I remember, Yu, Chip said. All of us had part of our memories erased. You did it yourself, Yu replied. You sealed your memories before entering the lab because you were afraid that the Shi family would learn too many secrets during your research. Before Master passed away, he said that to protect the Shi family's development in Mist Bodhisattva, he must not reveal the secrets of the past. That's why Zoel, Euryphia, and you all sealed your memories before entering the lab. I didn't think that you could be saved, but your subconscious told you not to dig into your memories. That's why you chose to believe what I told you before I went into hibernation. Master wouldn't erase our memories, you know that. Master once said that every memory is a precious treasure. Be it sad or happy, it's an indispensable part of us. Even if we aren't real people, we still have the right to our memories. This is the respect Master gave us. That's right. How could that person erase their memories? Chip fell silent. I didn't think that you were willing to be test subjects back then. Shikai's voice sounded a little hoarse. Of course we were willing. Why else do you think that arrogant Euryphia would agree to be dissected so easily? How could the cold-hearted Zoel be so easily dealt with by those people, allowing them to stab him? You stared at Shikai for a while before looking away. That generation of Shikais had fought against the combined efforts of many major forces and achieved countless amazing things. That was the Shi family's most glorious era, and the time when geniuses gathered. None of the Shi family members that came after that were capable of anything. Capable of anything. Capable of anything. Capable of anything. Shikai's head was spinning. He didn't think that this word would be applied to the Shi family. We were supposed to be the most glorious generation, but we suffered such a setback later on. Master said that no matter how many geniuses there are, they can't resist the will of the heavens. He said that the Shi family was so talented that even the gods couldn't stand it anymore. That's why they created so many disasters, wars, electromagnetic storms, internal divisions, and so on. Eventually, we were the only ones left, and we became more and more ordinary. You looked at Shikai again when he said, more and more ordinary, and Shikai's face turned bright red. Then, you looked at his fingers and bent all four of them until only one remained. But I'm not as stupid as them. I have to wait for Sigma and keep more secrets. I can't let you useless people go to waste. Therefore, even if the Shi family members went into hibernation, they wouldn't automatically enter the lab to be studied. Shikai felt his face burning. Although he wasn't the one who did those things, he did want to study the original robot first. But Yu's words put Shikai's mind at ease. It was true that he didn't have the ability to do so. It wasn't because of the mysterious brain complex, but because there was a huge gap between him and the peak generation. After you stopped talking, Silen asked, is there no way to go back? Can't you recreate the things inside the black box? Yu shook his head. Too much data was lost, and we weren't involved in the project back then. We don't know much about it. Sigma knows a lot more than we do. Master taught it a lot when it was there. But if there isn't a connection point on this side to activate this bridge, the people from the other side won't be able to come here. Suddenly, Yu looked at Silen. So, how did you get here in the first place? Without a connection point, how could you accurately come to this side and not to another galaxy? Shikai's mouth fell open. Did that mean that Silen wasn't a citizen of the Mist Bodhisattva Empire or this galaxy? The Shi family didn't originate from this galaxy. Huimao whispered something to Yu and explained the situation to him. Yu stared at the ring fingerprint on Silen's hand and rubbed his chin. Maybe there's a signal or a spacetime mark on it. But it must have come into contact with the black box before. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a guiding signal. Silen's eyes flashed as he recalled Genya's experience. Back then, Genya accidentally stumbled into an unstable wormhole and went to the League of Stars. The wormhole disappeared not long after Genya entered it. Previously, he had always thought that it was just one of the many unstable wormholes. However, now that he thought about it, the lost black box was definitely around that wormhole. If not, it would not have coincidentally reached the Star Alliance instead of other galaxies and regions. Yu spread his arms, jumped off the cable, and flew to Silen's side. I've decided to follow you guys for now. Shikai shot Silen a glance. He was the real Shi family member, but the original robot treated Silen much better than he did. Was it true that they were disappointed in the Shi family after all that had happened? Chip didn't object. He knew that you wanted to follow Silen to find the black box and then find Sigma. When they arrived, only Silen and Huimao came. When they left, they brought you with them. It was a lot more lively. Huimao logged into the return forum with you. At first, you just watched the war like everyone else online. It needed to absorb more information. Gradually, you joined in the war of words with Huimao. That day, a lot of people fainted from anger. When they were tired of the forum, you said he wanted to watch TV, so Silen gave him a microcomputer. Out of boredom, Huimao went to watch with you. But when it saw the video you selected, its whiskers trembled, and trembled again, and again. This robot was watching X-rated movies. What was shown on the screen was a scene of them kissing each other to the point of forgetting everything else. Then, it was the scene of the protagonists making love, moaning and moaning for a long time. Oh, I'm so shy. Ayue covered his face with his hands and looked embarrassed. Silen. What's with that weird blue band of light flashing between your fingers? Huimao flicked his ears. Never mind. It was more interesting to bicker with those old pedants on the forum. Aren't you afraid that Sigma will get lonely? Asked Silen. Yu turned his head away, his fingers still covering his face. Of course it will get lonely, but it won't go crazy like other people. It's Sigma, the Sigma that thinks differently from other people. For example, most people will measure the distance between their dreams and reality first if it's too far away. If it's too far away, they'll feel depressed or even despair. Sigma, on the other hand, will pay more attention to whether its dreams are there or not. As long as its dreams are there, it will continue to persevere, even for 1,000 years. Silen smiled. True. That guy is pretty good. Silen thought of the naive robot at the base again. It flew around waving its arms, enjoying simple happiness and contentment like a child. When he thought back to when the shortcut was activated, it must have been very depressed. I wonder how they're doing now though. Silen returned to the capital with you and Huimao. He didn't report the mission to Guan Feng first. Instead, he went to the Zhen family to look for Zhenya. Zhenya had heard about the incident Sillin caused in the academic world a long time ago, but he didn't comment on it. He wouldn't say too much if it was something Sillin thought. Sillin asked Zhenya about what happened in the past. Because it was an internal matter of the Zhen family, Sillin didn't ask anything else. He only asked where Zhenya encountered the wormhole and when exactly. After answering all the questions, Zhenya looked at Sillin. You want to go back? Yes, I want to see if I can find a way back. I didn't actually expect to come back. I only hoped that you would reach a certain level of strength before going out and exploring the boundless world. Have you found a way? Sillin had a feeling that Zhenya was looking forward to going back. You want to go back too, Master, don't you? Could it be that you have someone you miss? Celine teased. You. Zhenya knocked on Sillin's head and waved. Let's go check on Guan Feng. I think something happened to him, but he didn't want to tell anyone. Something happened? What happened? But since Zhenya didn't look anxious or worried, it meant that it wasn't serious. Alright, I'll go to AF1 later. Oh right, did you receive the golden thread turtle I asked Tuasan to send over? At the time, Sillin had left San Colombo in a hurry, so he asked Tuasan to take care of it. I did. Zhenya's smile deepened at the mention of this. I'm keeping it for myself. I heard that anyone who sees a golden thread turtle over 100 years old will have their lifespan increased by another 100 years. That's why a few of my old friends have been coming here frequently recently. They even tried to take it away from me. Hee, no way. Most old people liked this kind of legend, especially one related to lifespan. It was always a good thing to look forward to whether it was true or not, wasn't it? Wheeze, you, let's go. Blue skin, don't sprain your back. That tail of yours isn't for you to practice standing straight. Sillin roared at the sea. Zhenya looked at them with amusement. But after Sillin left with Yu and Huimao, Zhenya's smile slowly faded. He looked into the distance. Someone the League of Stars was worried about. Yes, Guan Feng was injured, and it wasn't light at all. His entire arm was almost crippled, and he had been cooped up at home recently. If Zhenya hadn't contacted him because of Sillin's trouble, he wouldn't have known that Guan Feng was injured. Sillin's first reaction when he heard the reason for Guan Feng's injury was, "You must be kidding me, right?" Everyone knew that Guan Feng was a great player with the Purgatory Thunder Snake, but he hadn't expected that he would be injured by his own gun, and by the lowest level Type B gun no less. Guan Feng had always called himself the originator of the Purgatory Thunder Snake, so it was no wonder that he was too embarrassed to go out and meet people. Guan Feng couldn't be blamed entirely. He was too tired when he was researching the medium Purgatory Thunder Snake cannon, and he was injured by the Type B gun he called entry-level in a moment of carelessness. That's why you shouldn't be busy with other things right now. Help me finish the rest of the project. We can't drag this out for too long, or it's easy to make a mistake. Guan Feng told Sillin about the project. As expected, he didn't have enough energy to do it alone. On the other side of the living room, Huimao and Yu were fighting with the squirting fish inside the giant fish tank. When Guan Feng turned around, he saw Yu lying on the edge of the fish tank and electrocuting the last fish with his finger. The tip of his finger glowed with electricity as he knocked out the last fish. Guan Feng. He knew that the person with that cat couldn't be a good person. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.